Chapter 71. Before the Mausoleum of Books, they had not seen each other for several years. After that, they were like strangers, even enemies. However, they were still master and disciple. They had lived together in Shining Village's old temple for 10-some years, so they understood each other to the extreme. Just from the slightest movement, even the change in their eyes, they knew what the other was thinking. This is what was called feeling. Shang Xingzhou could feel Chun Changsheng's emotions when he pulled out the sword from the flower pot, which was why he asked that question. But after getting Chun Changsheng's confirmation, he didn't relax, nor did he feel proud, but asked another question. Do you know what this place is? Chun Changsheng was the principal of the Tradition Academy. He had lived here for many years, but he really didn't know what these red buildings were. The Tradition Academy was too big. These years, the place where he studied and lived was limited to the forest near the royal city and the vicinity of the mountains. It wasn't even 1/10 of the size of the Tradition Academy. Shang Xingzhou said, "This is the Maple Forest Pavilion." Those 2 rows of maple trees were moved here from the Bureau of Ecclesiastic Education. Chun Changsheng thought to himself, "No wonder he looked so familiar. Mei Lisha is my friend." Shang Xingzhou looked at his face and said with mixed emotions, "He has always admired you. I didn't understand it, but now I'm starting to understand." Hearing these words, Chun Changsheng didn't know if he should feel proud or gratified, or if he should let the bitterness in his heart freely spread. He could only remain silent. At a time like this, what was the point of saying such words? Perhaps it was precisely because Shang Xingzhou had confirmed that Chun Changsheng's sword were about to be used up and thought of Chun Changsheng's defeat or even death that he was feeling sentimental. But what was so important about the arrival of this Maple Forest Pavilion? Shang Xingzhou turned to look out of the building and said, "The final battle that year took place here. That year was more than 20 years ago, the night of the bloody incident of the Orthodox Academy." The Maple Forest Pavilion was so eye-catching. Perhaps it was because it had been stained with too much blood that night. That night, many people died here, many young people. They were as good as you, maybe even better than you. Shang Xingzhou withdrew his gaze and looked at Chun Changsheng, saying, "I've seen too many deaths in my life. I really don't care anymore, so don't expect me to be soft-hearted." The meaning of this sentence was very clear. If Chun Changsheng still didn't admit defeat, he wouldn't be afraid of personally killing Chun Changsheng with his sword. Chun Changsheng didn't admit defeat. He didn't even say anything, remaining silent. He raised his right hand and held the dagger horizontally in front of him. The mud gradually fell, and the cold light gradually intensified. Shang Xingzhou understood his choice and walked towards him. A clear footprint appeared on the floor. Each footprint glowed and then burst into flames. After the clouds dispersed in the blue sky, the sun was incomparably bright, shining upon the Orthodox Academy. The Maple Forest Pavilion shone with a dazzling light, as if it was really burning. The maple trees outside swayed with the wind like tongues of fire. This was a fire formed from the burning of countless years of thick blood. It emitted a faint charred smell and gave off a heroic and awe-inspiring feeling. The blood and fire illuminated Shang Xingzhou's figure, making him look abnormally tall, like a demonic god. This was his life, the lives of Wang Zhizi, the Tang Old Master, and the others. They would not give up their ideals and perseverance for anything. There was a clear whistle. A strong gale blew in the Maple Forest Pavilion. The maple tree swayed even more violently, as if tongues of fire were spitting out, wanting to burn the heavens. Shang Xingzhou gripped his dagger with both hands and slashed down, bringing with it a stream of blood and fire. The blood and fire were bright and dazzling, but his figure was gloomy and cold. The contrast between the two was particularly striking. With a boom, the blood and fire exploded into countless sparks that danced throughout the Maple Forest Pavilion, igniting the floor and pillars. The dagger flew through the window. Chun Changsheng retreated 10-some steps and vomited blood. Shang Xingzhou raised his sword and once more walked towards him. No panic could be seen on Chun Changsheng's face. He said to Shang Xingzhou, "Concede, master." From the very beginning, he had said these words. in the lake, in front of Tibet, and in many other places, he would pick up a sword and say these words. And then, those swords would be cut down by Shang Xingzhou. Now, even his last sword had disappeared, but he was still saying these words. Shang Xingzhou did not show any derision on his face, nor was he confused. It seemed that he knew where Chen Changsheng's confidence came from. Chen Changsheng raised his right hand. There was nothing there except air and fire. Could he really make a sword out of the air? Not far away, the sound of air being cut could be heard. Swish! A cold light pierced through the window and then vanished. The dagger returned to Chen Changsheng's hand. Soon after, countless sounds of air being cut could be heard from various parts of the Orthodox Academy. These sounds were extremely sharp, naturally giving off a sharp feeling. The sounds grew more and more frequent, like a torrential rain, but even more like a torrential rain of arrows. Countless sword glows lit up from the bottom of the plum tree, in the tree, and in the water. The old plum tree had been neatly cut, looking like an incense burner that had been burning for 3 days and 3 nights. 10 holes appeared on the severed ancient tree, truly like a flute used by a god. Countless ripples appeared in the lake, like several hundred fat carps struggling to swim up from the rotting mud. Those swords that Tang 36 had hidden in the Orthodox Academy. Those swords that Chen Changsheng had found. Those swords that Shang Xingzhou had struck down. Flying through the air, flying towards the Maple Forest Pavilion. Several dozen swords arrived at Chen Changsheng's side. Shang Xingzhou looked at him and said, "Not enough." Chen Changsheng's finger lightly tapped the dagger. A crisp sword cry scattered in all directions, carrying with it several dozen cold and extremely pure sword intents. With a light crack, Shang Xingzhou's Taoist bun was severed. For that seemingly ordinary ebony bun to be severed at this moment was definitely not ordinary. Countless cold glows surged out from within, like great rivers, exuding a feeling of excitement. Fierce winds blew, chopping the swaying maple tree into pieces, madly dancing red shards flying in all directions. The eaves of the pavilion were cut into countless straight lines, the red walls and pillars cut into countless mottled lines. Even the flames that were about to be ignited by the sun also needed to be attached to an objective object. Without the skin, a tall building would collapse, so how could blood and fire be sustained? The tongues of flame burning towards the sky gradually faded. Their color also gradually faded, until they ultimately vanished into nothingness. Sunlight spilled over the ruined Maple Forest Pavilion. Several thousand swords quietly floated around Chen Changsheng. Cold and terrifying sword intents filled the world. These sword intents were faintly connected to an array, flowing and circulating, endlessly multiplying, giving off an impenetrable feeling. Chen Changsheng looked at Shang Xingzhou and asked, "Is it enough now?" The Maple Forest Pavilion, from the nature of a hero, Brother Ma. I prepared this scene more than 2 years ago, not long after Choosing Heavenswell began. I especially like it. To be continued. Chapter 72. Half of the Maple Forest Pavilion had already collapsed, and there were broken walls and broken windows everywhere. As the sunlight fell, it was separated from the tall red maples by the thin clouds that were gradually drifting back. The dim light was refracted by thousands of swords and did not become bright. It was more like the reflection of water. Chen Changsheng loosened his grip, and the short sword that had been hidden in the flower pot for many years flew away, merging with the rain of swords in the sky. He reached out and plucked a sword from the air, as if he was plucking a fruit from a fruit tree in autumn. This sword was also very short, but it was extremely bright and incomparably sharp. It was precisely stainless. The wooden bun had been broken into 2, and no one knew where it had fallen. The vault sheath landed at Shang Xingzhou's feet. This scabbard, named Vault Sheath, was an important treasure of Li Palace. After Chen Changsheng left Xining village, he had always kept it by his side. At first, this might have just been a casual stroke of Shang Xingzhou's, but today, it had finally become an incredible hidden trick. At the beginning of the battle, he had taken the vault sheath from Chen Changsheng's hands. The vault sheath isolated Chen Changsheng's divine sense, preventing him from recalling those swords. He had fallen into a hopeless situation. It could even be said that he was in a dead end. But later on, he found many swords in the Orthodox Academy, and all of them had sword intents. The scabbard could isolate his divine sense, but for some reason, it could not completely isolate the sword intent. Sword intent was the meaning of sword. The meaning of those swords was to summon, to stand shoulder to shoulder, to undress, to be comrades. At this point, the scabbard could no longer stop all the swords from leaving, despite its name, because those sword intents were showing off their sharpness. The Prince of Xiang's eyes were a little red, perhaps because of the sawdust drifting out of the Orthodox Academy. Perhaps it was because he could see those sharp sword wills through the thick courtyard walls. He raised his sleeve to wipe his eyes, then suddenly turned around and walked out of Hunderblossom Street, causing quite a commotion. Wampa glanced at him, but did not follow. It didn't take long for the Prince of Xiang to appear on the bridge of helplessness. Winter had already passed, and all living things had come alive. Spring was about to arrive. The Luo River had already melted and was slowly flowing, carrying with it a few icy dregs. 2 streams of tears flowed down the Prince of Xiang's cheeks. His face was round and big, so the scene looked a little funny, but not sad. Standing beside him was a white-haired old man. His face was round and big, and he looked a little comical. Perhaps it could be said that he was extremely festive. The old man was called Chao Yunping. He was the nephew of the Elder of Heavenly Secrets and was once one of the storms of the 8 directions. 100-some years ago, he was defeated by Su Li's sword. In his grief and indignation, he disregarded the advice of the Elder of Heavenly Secrets and the Tianhai Divine Empress, crippling all his techniques and starting from the beginning. In the end, he suffered a cultivation defect, a problem with his brain. In recent years, Chao Yunping rarely appeared in front of others. Very few people knew that Chen Changsheng had met him on his way to White Emperor City. He was originally invited by someone in power to make things difficult for Chen Changsheng, but in the end, he was persuaded by Chen Changsheng to prioritize the overall situation of the human race. Later on, he killed Mu Jiushi in the Western Sea. Yes, this expert of the divine domain had already recovered his cultivation and was even stronger than before. As for intelligence, no one knew whether he was really as innocent as a child or whether he had learned to act innocent. But why had he appeared in the capital today? And why had he met with the Prince of Xiang by the Luo River? Could it be that the person who had invited him to make things difficult for Chen Changsheng had been the Prince of Xiang? Why are you crying? Chao Yunping looked at the Prince of Xiang and very seriously asked, "Because no one is willing to give you candy to eat?" Without waiting for the Prince of Xiang's reply, he quickly added, "Su Yurong only gave me 1 bag of candy, so I can't share it with you." These were 2 very simple sentences, seemingly childish and cute, perhaps even pitiful, but they had already revealed enough information. If these were the conditions for negotiation, then these were very clear. The Prince of Xiang used a handkerchief to wipe the tears from the corner of his eyes and sighed. "I'm sad because the venerable Taoist is about to lose. My days from now on will be very difficult." Chao Yunping froze at these words, and then he grinned and innocently said, "You swindler, how could that be possible?" Yes, there was no reason for Shang Xingzhou to lose to Chen Changsheng. The difference in cultivation levels between the two was too great. But in this battle between master and disciple, there had been a precondition from the very start. Shang Xingzhou had to suppress his cultivation below the divine domain. He alone possessed the South Stream Temple Sword Array. The current Chen Changsheng could be considered the strongest expert below the divine domain. Not even the Demon Lord or Qiushan Jun were a match for him. Even in the tens of thousands of years of history of cultivation, it would be very difficult to find someone as powerful as him before breaking into the divine domain. The Prince of Xiang glanced over the academy wall and began to cry. He had seen those sword intents and was truly rather disappointed. It seemed like Shang Xingzhou had no choice but to lose. The Maple Forest Pavilion was very quiet. The Orthodox Academy was very quiet. The wind blew over the lake and the maple forest, passing through the ruined Maple Forest Pavilion. It was cut to pieces by the swords in the sky and then gathered back together, giving off very complicated sounds. Some sounds were like sobs, some were like resentful howls. "I will not lose to you," Shang Xingzhou said to Qin Changsheng. "I taught you." This was his principle, his reason. "I will not lose to you." These words were actually saying that he could not lose to you. Shang Xingzhou took a step forward and said a single word. This word sounded very simple, just a single syllable. But when this word was heard, it revealed its true face, the incomparably complex undulations of its tone. In this extremely short period of time, it was as if there was an endless amount of information. This was not the language of humans, but the remnants of an ancient civilization, an intelligent world as magnificent and beautiful as the sea of stars. His blue Taoist robe danced in the wind, the cry of a dragon rising with it, resounding through the Orthodox Academy. Shang Xingzhou's eyes turned pale, making him seem like a ghost or a god. An unimaginably ancient qi swept toward Qin Changsheng and the rain of swords in the sky. Qin Changsheng stared into Shang Xingzhou's eyes and suddenly said a single word. This word was also a single syllable, but it was similarly strange and complex, simply incomprehensible and extremely remote. The faint cry of a dragon came from the sky, once more shrouded in clouds, brimming with delight and gratification. Countless swords descended according to Qin Changsheng's will. Awe-inspiring sword intense, and the cries of swords could be heard everywhere. Countless straight and deep sword slashes appeared in the sky. There was a light clap. The wind stopped. The world became incomparably quiet once more. The rain of swords was about to fall, suspended in the sky. Shang Xingzhou stood in front of Qin Changsheng, his entire body covered in blood. His right hand clutched Qin Changsheng's throat. With just the slightest bit of force, Qin Changsheng would die. At this moment, Wang Jitsu's voice rang out. "You've lost. This illness has really been exhausting. Today, I wrote a chapter in a fit of craziness. Tomorrow, I might say I won't write it anymore. It's all right. After all, it's the most important chapters. I don't dare to be negligent, but I really don't have the energy to think about chapter names. But this is fine. It's simple and direct enough. To be continued. Chapter 73. Like usual? Then what?" Seeing that the person talking was Qin Changsheng, Tang 36's expression suddenly became lively. He rolled his eyes and asked, "Just like before, you will directly curse at me?" Qin Changsheng thought about it and said, "When you get tired of cursing, you will fall asleep." Tang 36 looked at the seats of the Heavenly Academy students and students. After a moment of silence, he said in a low voice, "After all, some people treat me well." During the entrance exam of the Heavenly Academy, Qin Changsheng saw some scenes from afar and knew that the Vice Principal Zhuang cared a lot about him. Now that Tang 36 was looking at Vice Principal Zhuang, Qin Changsheng thought that there must be a story behind it. It was probably because of this person that Tang 36 behaved differently than usual. But, as a person, you should be yourself first. Tang 36 looked at the seats of the Heavenly Academy and thought about the storms hidden in the past few months. He thought about how he was targeted by his classmates. He thought about what happened to him 2 nights before the Ivy Festival. His lips curled up and showed a mysterious smile. If it was a normal day, Qin Changsheng wouldn't give any opinions to his choices, even if he was his only friend. Because of his personality, Qin Changsheng wouldn't give any opinions to his choices. But tonight, just like Tang 36 in the Heavenly Academy, he fell into the shameless trap of his opponent and barely escaped from the giant black dragon. A lot of things had changed. He looked at Tang 36 and didn't say anything, but his calm and sure eyes showed his support. "You want me to apologize to those Southerners?" Tang 36 looked at Zhuang Huanyu and said, "This is too boring. Your performance is also too boring." Sounds of astonishment rang out in the hall. Zhuang Huanyu was ranked 10th on the honor roll of Green Cloud. He was the leader of the young elites in the Ivy League. He was as famous as the 7 rules of heaven in the South. Although his previous performance made people feel uncomfortable and even shameful, he was still the representative of the Heavenly Academy. Tang 36, as a student of the Heavenly Academy, pointed out his mistakes was a bit disrespectful. Because it's boring, so it's not fun. Since it's not fun, then why am I still playing here? Don't try to use our relationship as classmates to restrict me. Don't use your identity as a teacher to control me. Don't use your identity as a senior to shut me up. Because I have decided to quit the school. Tang 36 looked at his former classmates and teachers and said calmly, I have decided to leave the Heavenly Academy. Even though the people in the hall had experienced too many shocks tonight, they were still in an uproar when they heard his words. The Heavenly Academy was the continent's #1 academy, and it had trained countless peerless cultivators. The current pope came from this academy, and many of the first-place winners of the first banner also came from this academy. Even though in recent years, the young students of the Heavenly Academy had been stolen by the 7 laws from the Southern Divine Kingdom, and the Zhou dynasty had a peerless genius like Su Yurong. In the end, the Heavenly Academy was still the Heavenly Academy. No one dared to question the status of this academy. Everyone took the test to enter the Heavenly Academy as an honor. Many people bitterly searched just to step into the Heavenly Academy's gate. But tonight, there was someone who took the initiative to leave the Heavenly Academy. The uproar in the hall continued. The expressions of the teachers and students of the academy were ugly to the extreme, and Vice Principal Zhuang's face was a bit pale. The surprising thing was that the Heavenly Academy's principal, Mao Qiuyu, didn't have any reaction. On the contrary, the old man's expression was a bit relieved, as if everything was within his expectations. I know a lot of people will ask me why. Tang 36 looked at the crowd and said emotionlessly, the Heavenly Academy has the best teachers, the best students, and I have to admit that I have been taken care of a lot. Even if I suffered a bit, compared to these, it doesn't seem to be enough for me to make the decision to leave the academy. But just like what I said, the current Heavenly Academy is really boring. Boring, it's not fun. If it's not fun, why should I continue to play here? This was something he had said before, and many people recalled it. Just because I said I wanted to destroy Tianhaya Air, the teachers and seniors in the academy forbade me from participating in the Ivy Festival. Just because I wanted to challenge Zhuang Huanyu. Someone trapped me with a seal for one night. Don't talk to me about the big picture. In the past, when did the Heavenly Academy need to care about other people's big picture? What about the Heavenly Academy now? Even the Tianhai family is scared. What's going on? This is not the Heavenly Academy that I have read about in the books. This Heavenly Academy is so boring, so boring. Tang 36 looked at the teachers and students of the Heavenly Academy and said, his words were frivolous, but his expression was extremely serious because these were his true words before he left. These words caused an even greater uproar in the hall, because this youth from Wenshui had mentioned the Tianhai clan. There was a lot of content in these words, but people only heard about the Tianhai family. Even the Tianhai family is scared. He actually used the word even. He actually thought that the Tianhai family shouldn't be scared. Prince Chun Lu slightly lowered his head. 2 wine cups appeared on the table in front of him. The wine in the cups reflected the light from the luminous pearls. It was very beautiful, and he seemed to be lost in thought. Mou looked at Tang 36 indifferently. Her right hand lightly held the teacup, and the tea in the cup didn't make a single ripple. Tianhai was the surname of the Divine Queen. The Tianhai family was the family of the Divine Queen's mother. After the cruel war 10 years ago, the Tianhai family had already replaced the Chun family and became one of the most honorable surnames on this continent, just like the Bai family in the West. In terms of power, the Tianhai family was undoubtedly the #1 in the world. In the current Zhou dynasty, even the Li Palace where the Pope lived would treat the Tianhai family gently. Even if countless people secretly hated the Tianhai family, no one dared to say such words in public. Who could be like Tang 36 and criticize the Tianhai family in front of so many people? People looked at Tang 36 with a complicated expression. Some admired him, some pitied him, but of course, most of them looked at him like he was an idiot. Did this young man get addicted to slapping faces tonight? He didn't even let the Tian High family go. Tang 36 didn't seem to feel these gazes, and he didn't even think about what kind of danger was hidden in his words. He looked at Zhuang Huanyu coldly and said, I know you had a hard time when you were young, but that's not a reason for you to blame anyone. Don't always think that everyone in this world wronged you. You act like you're fine in front of others, but in your heart, you're always blaming yourself. You're already in the top 10 of the honor roll of green clouds, but you still feel that fate is unfair. Otherwise, if you could be as strong as Qiu Shanjun, who are you showing your resentment to? I can't stand and hate people like you the most. Right now, there are too many students like you in the Heavenly Academy, so it's becoming more and more like a theater. All you do is babble and sing soft songs. Of course it's boring. The hall gradually quieted down. People looked at the seats of the Heavenly Academy and at Zhuang Huanyu. Zhuang Huanyu was silent for a long time. His expression gradually calmed down. He looked at Tang 36 and said, I did lose my composure before. No matter what you did wrong, no matter if you care about the existence of the Heavenly Academy or not, it's not my place to criticize you. Even though what you said is ugly, it's still reasonable. But have you ever thought about why, after you entered the Heavenly Academy, the teachers and us don't like you? Why do you feel that they're pushing you away in the dark? Pride? No, the students of the Heavenly Academy should be proud. You are a descendant of the one Shui Tang family. You were born with a golden spoon in your mouth. You were taken care of by important people when you entered the academy. You can skip classes, you can disobey the rules of the academy, but you still got what you deserve. What about the other students? They have to study hard to get something, so they naturally look down on people like you who only know how to take shortcuts. At this moment, most of the people sitting on the seats in the hall were students from normal families. The dozens of young students from the Southern Ambassadors were mostly poor. The 3 young people from the 7 Laws of God listened to Zhuang Huanyu's words, and Gohan Shi, who was born in a poor family, also seemed to be thinking about something. Vice Principal Zhuang's face was very ugly because he knew that the important person who took care of Tang 36 was him. Maybe what you said is reasonable. The Heavenly Academy has its rules and has a tradition that has been passed down for thousands of years. Maybe the teachers and you all think that only those who go through hardship can be successful. But my family has a lot of money. What can I do? Do I have to pretend to be poor? Or do I have to ask my grandfather to give away all of his wealth? Then the Divine Queen would probably be very happy. Tang 36 shook his head and said, You have your reasons, I have my habits, and the Heavenly Academy has its rules. Tonight, we won't talk about who is right or wrong, but since we are not suitable for each other, then this matter will never become fun. So, I will leave the Heavenly Academy. Shut up. Vice Principal Zhuang yelled with an ugly face. When he was young, he was indebted to the one Shui Tang family, and there were many old stories between him and the Tang family. Since he promised the elders of the Tang family to take care of Tang 36's life in the capital, how could he just watch Tang 36 mess around? Your father gave you to me. Do you really think I don't dare to discipline you? Tang 36 looked at him and thought for a while. He scratched his head and said, Uncle Zhuang, you always say that my father asked you to take care of me. Actually, on the way to the capital, I already opened that letter and read it. I know that the person who asked you to take care of me is my mother, so don't use that sentence to pressure me. Vice Principal Zhuang's finger trembled in anger and said, You bastard, how could you open the letter? Open the letter. For some reason, Zhuang Huanyu's face turned pale when he heard this. Tang 36 said, Anyways, I will leave the Heavenly Academy tonight. Vice Principal Zhuang said bitterly, Kid, why are you so disobedient? The preparatory course is over, and you want to leave the school. What about the great trial next year? Tang 36 paused and realized that this was indeed a problem. This is not a problem. Chun Changsheng smiled and said, Come to my place. Tang 36 raised his eyebrows and said, Come to your place? Chun Changsheng said, The students of the Tradition Academy also have the right to directly participate in the great trial. He would never make a mistake about this rule. When he first came to the capital, he didn't want to take the preparatory course and directly participate in the great trial next year. That's why he tried so hard to get into the 6 Ivies. But he didn't expect that fate would make him the first freshman of the Tradition Academy in many years. Tang 36's eyebrows raised even higher, as if he found something very interesting and fun. How many people do you have now? 3. Chun Chang Sheng pointed at himself and Luo and said, there is another one who stayed in the Tradition Academy tonight. You have seen him before. Tang 36 was silent for a while and then laughed and said, count me in. Chun Chang Sheng thought for a while and said, then we have 4 people. Chun Chang Sheng's stamp collecting activity continues. The Tradition Academy has 4 people. Today there is only 1 chapter. Chapter 74. There will definitely be more typos and mistakes in the next few days, as I still don't have the energy to keep up and have even less time to fix them. But the plot is wonderful. Swords fell like rain, aimed at the master and disciple on the ruins. The wind stopped, the stones stopped rolling, and there was naturally no sound, only silence. The people in 100 Flowers Lane noticed this silence and knew that something major had occurred. Life and death were naturally the truly important matters. In the Tradition Academy, that shocking killing intent that rose to the heavens intimidated everyone's mind. Suddenly, the sound of a zither rang out, snapping countless strings. Crossbow bolts were randomly fired in front of the Orthodox Academy, sacred light illuminating the gloomy sky. Whistles through the air and grunts of injured arrows could be heard from time to time. When the chaotic situation was once more brought under control, several pools of blood could be seen in the lane. Wangpa had disappeared. Linghai Jiwang's complexion was abnormally pale, as he was worried that something had happened to the Pope. If something had not happened in the Orthodox Academy, if the Pope had not been in danger, why would Wangpa forcefully strike at such a tense moment and then charge into the Academy? A bitterly cold blade, intent, appeared in front of the Maple Forest Pavilion. A breeze ruffled the red maples as Wangpa appeared in front of the ruins. As he saw the scene and sensed the Taoist qi and sword intents lingering in the air, he very quickly confirmed the general situation. How could a genius of a generation be so unbearable? Wangpo's words were as sharp as a blade. The cold winds, stirred up by the blade intent, were instantly severed. Tang 36 sighed. Yes, it's too shameful. He spoke with great sincerity, giving off the feeling that he was completely concerned about Shang Xingzhou's reputation. Su Yurong said nothing. At some point, she had already walked up behind Qin Changsheng. She was extremely close, only a few steps away. This was a very risky course of action. It was impossible to see the expression on her face as her head was lowered. One could only see her trembling eyelashes. Her eyelashes shone brilliantly in the light, like the leaves of a ginkgo tree in autumn. The light came from her eyes, from the blazing essence blood of the phoenix. She was ready to strike at any moment, or save Qin Changsheng, or perish together with Shang Xingzhou. The clouds in the sky fled in all directions. As the mountainous body of the dragon got closer and closer to the ground, the shadow grew heavier and heavier. But in the next moment, the shadow stopped growing because she could clearly see the scene and feel fear. And where was Yuren? Wangpa was right, and Tang 36 was speaking from the bottom of his heart. With Shang Xingzhou's status, it was indeed inexcusable for him to go back on his word. What's more, he was Chun Changsheng's master, so this would be even more embarrassing. Wang Jitze had been invited to the capital by him, but he would not support him. He said, if you make a move, you know what I will do next. Shang Xingzhou did not necessarily fear Wang Jitze, even if he might join hands with Wangpa. The Prince of Xiang and the princes of the Chun clan would support him, as would the experts of the court and the military. This war was worth fighting, even if it was a little risky. He really wanted to go back on his word and kill Qin Changsheng. When Wang Jitze said that he had lost, he closed his eyes and saw many futures. Those were the different futures he would have after making different choices. One of them seemed to be the most beautiful, so he ran it over 5 times and succeeded in repeating the perfect process 4 times. That future also began with his choice. His fingers would tighten slightly. Qin Changsheng's head would fall to the ground like a ripe fruit and then be smashed into pulp. What followed would be an extremely dangerous battle. He might lose, he might win, but his life would not be in danger. Regardless of victory or defeat, at the most desperate moment of the battle, he would voluntarily give up, admit his crimes to the young emperor, and ask for seclusion in Luoyang. In the following years, the Li Palace would be masterless and internal strife would inevitably arise. Coupled with external pressure, he would be able to very easily wrest back the authority of the orthodoxy. At some point in time, he would have Prince Qianlu die. In another few years, the Prince of Zhongshan would rebel and lead the cavalry of Blue Pass south. At that time, he would return from Luoyang. If he did not return, the Prince of Zhongshan would assuredly lose, but he had to seize this chance to clearly discuss with the young emperor about the matters of the past and cast those matters of the past to the back of his mind. Only in this way could master and disciple be of one mind, could the entire world submit to them. In another few years, the world would be unified, the people would be united, the human race would prosper, and it would be the day of the northern expedition. 1,000,000 mighty soldiers would besiege the city. Which city was the city? Of course, Xuelao City. This was the result, Shang Xingzhou's calculations. This was that incomparably beautiful future. For this future, he was willing to give up everything, sacrifice everything, even if this will go down in infamy for 10,000 years. Wang Jitze asked, "For the last several centuries, I have always remained behind the curtain. If not for Tianhai's pressure, perhaps I would never have walked onto the stage today." Shang Xingzhou said, "I don't even care about leaving my name in the annals of history. So why would I care about leaving behind a bad reputation or a good one?" Wang Jitze said nothing more, because he knew that Shang Xingzhou truly was this sort of person. Wang Po also said nothing, his right hand tightly gripping the hilt of his blade. Shang Xingzhou's killing intent towards Qin Changsheng was so real. His hand was on Qin Changsheng's throat. Who could stop him? The wall behind the Maple Forest Pavilion suddenly collapsed. As the dust settled, Yuren's figure was revealed. Shang Xingzhou calmly gazed at him. Yuren very slowly shook his head, his expression extremely solemn. Shang Xingzhou understood his meaning. Yuren was saying to him, "Your calculations cannot be established. If you kill Junior Brother, I will never forgive you." Without master and disciple being of one mind, the world would naturally not submit to them, and there would be no final scene. Shang Xingzhou was not affected in the slightest, because he was very confident. Shang Xingzhou believed that as long as he had enough time, Yuren would eventually understand his painstaking efforts. But why hadn't he done anything yet? Or perhaps it was because one person had been too quiet. That person was about to die, dying from shamelessness. He had every reason to be angry. He could curse and swear. He could speak passionately. He could spit on Shang Xingzhou's face. But he did nothing. When Shang Xingzhou was talking to Wang Jitze and the others, he just quietly watched him like he was enjoying a play. An arm's length away, everyone felt that Shang Xingzhou would kill him. So why was he so calm? Shang Xingzhou was quiet for a while, then asked, "You've thought of this beforehand?" "I understand, sir, very well. If the world believes that sir is wrong, sir will definitely believe that the problem lies with the world, not you," Qin Changsheng said. "How could a person like sir, who is always correct, admit to his own failure?" Shang Xingzhou asked, "Then why did you arrange for today's match? If no matter the result of this match, Shang Xingzhou would not abide by their previous agreement, then what was the point? If Qin Changsheng had calculated this beforehand, why would he have expended so much energy to force Shang Xingzhou to agree to his demands, allowing the situation to develop to this point? Of course it's very meaningful, because it will help sir clearly see yourself." Qin Changsheng looked at Shang Xingzhou and said, "Sir, look at how ugly you are right now, how ugly you are." His eyes were clean and bright, like a mirror reflecting a face. It was a rather old face, covered in blood and dirt, and the pride and wildness of self-hypnosis. Shang Xingzhou found this face very unfamiliar. To be continued, Chapter 75. Shang Xingzhou knew that it was his own face, but he still found it very unfamiliar, because it was very different from the face he usually saw in the mirror. No one knew what sort of person Shang Xingzhou was. Probably only Yuren knew. Neither the Tang old master, Yin, nor Qin Changsheng understood him very well. To describe him in one word, he was not close. Shang Xingzhou was not close to his junior brother, not close to his old friends, and not close to his disciples. He was not close to the entire world, whether actively or passively, but he wanted to bring the world forward. Everyone said that Black Robe was the most mysterious person in the world, but in those first few centuries, he had been even more mysterious. He was more patient than Black Robe, more inconspicuous, and even more undemanding. If he wanted to, his portrait would definitely have had the right to be hung in the Lingyan Pavilion, and it would have been placed at the very front. But he still chose to remain in the darkness, not seeing the sun and not interacting with others. In those centuries, he played all sorts of roles and had countless faces. Perhaps it was precisely for this reason that he would often look in the mirror. Only then could he confirm who he was today. Gradually, he got used to talking to his reflection in the mirror, even when he no longer needed to play any other role. He had always kept the clear sky mirror at his side, and only this year had Su Yurong bring it to White Emperor City, where it had shattered in that battle. He was more familiar with his own face than anyone else, so he felt it was very unfamiliar now. His face was rather haggard, lacking its usual heroic spirit, making it seem old. Most importantly, his eyes were no longer as calm as they used to be. Between his raised brows and feigned indifference, the tyrannical aura of a king could be seen, making him seem rather foolish. It was just like that youngest prince back then, his brows twisted in the 100-herb garden as he clamored about something. In the end, he was still shot to death by arrows. When King Chu died, his face was also covered in blood and grime. Where did I go next? Yes, I went to the imperial palace and conveyed his majesty's will to Emperor Taizu. Taizu seemed fat and stupid, but he was actually extremely intelligent. How had he seen through my killing intent? His Majesty was truly too benevolent. He should have killed Wang Jitsu that night, so why spared his life? Without him, could the demons still not be defeated? It was truly inexplicable. With Chen Xuanba's astonishing talent and King Chu's great talent and bold vision, didn't His Majesty endure the pain of killing them? Why pity a scholar? Shang Xingzhou's thoughts drifted back from the past. His gaze also retracted from the distance and fell upon Chen Changsheng's face. There was also blood on Chen Changsheng's face, but for some reason, it still seemed very clean. Moreover, this face was very calm, and there was no sign of fear on it. Shang Xingzhou was a little angry. Chen Changsheng's words made him very uncomfortable. Chen Changsheng's calmness was even more unacceptable to him. He asked, "Are you really not afraid of death?" Chen Changsheng said, "Master, you should know better than anyone how afraid I am of death." When he was 10 years old, after Shang Xingzhou said those words to him, he was sad for a long time. There were many nights when he cried under the covers. It was Yuren who was patting him on the back and coaxing him through the blanket. But how could Shang Xingzhou, who was in the room next to the wall, not know? But the more I think about it, the more afraid I become numb to it. Chen Changsheng continued, "Now that I think about it, I truly must thank Sir for arranging this life for me." Shang Xingzhou said, "At that time, you were convinced that you wouldn't live past the age of 20. Every day, you faced death, so it was naturally easy for you to overcome your fear. Now that you've defied the heavens and changed your fate, you can roam freely in this world for 1,000 years, and you even have a high chance of seeing great freedom. Why are you still not afraid?" I also don't know if I'm truly not afraid or if it's something else. Probably only when death truly approaches will I understand my own heart. Chen Changsheng said, "I will help Sir clearly see yourself, and Sir can help me clearly see myself." Others were hell. Death was a bright mirror. One could straighten one's clothes. One could see one's heart. Time slowly passed. The maple trees were quiet. Shang Xingzhou still had not moved. "Let go," Wang Jitsu said. Since he wasn't going to move, why not let go? There were two meanings in letting go. Letting go of Chen Changsheng's neck. Letting go of this world. Shang Xingzhou said nothing, nor did he move. Does Sir feel that letting go like this is very shameful? Tang 36 suddenly laughed, then forcefully slapped the right side of his face. The slap was very clear and resounding. Tang 36's right side of his face reddened at a speed visible to the naked eye. He looked at Shang Xingzhou and said very seriously, "Sir, what does face matter?" Shang Xingzhou still said nothing. In the view of some people, Tang 36's actions were only to disturb Shang Xingzhou's mind, essentially speaking nonsense. Chen Changsheng did not think so. He knew that this was the true problem. He had just said that someone like Shang Xingzhou, who was always right, would never admit defeat. This fact made him feel rather tired, or perhaps bored. He said to Shang Xingzhou, "Why can't Sir learn to admit defeat? I haven't lost, so why should I admit defeat? Don't forget, in these 1,000 years, I've always been the winner." Shang Xingzhou proudly said, "Even if I once underestimated Tian Hai and made a mistake, in the end, I still won." Chen Changsheng was silent for a while, then asked, "If you're not willing to admit defeat, then what if you admit your mistake?" It was very quiet. Everyone's gazes fell on him. "If Sir insists on not admitting defeat, then can you admit your mistake?" Chen Changsheng very seriously asked Shang Xingzhou. Shang Xingzhou's expression froze. 3 years ago in the Orthodox Academy, it was also snowing that night. At the time, I told Sir that you were wrong between us. Chen Changsheng asked, "Since you were wrong, why don't you admit your mistake?" Not talking about victory and defeat, but about right and wrong. Just who was right and who was wrong. If he didn't admit defeat, would he admit his mistake? Shang Xingzhou said nothing. Chen Changsheng looked at him and asked, "Master, is it so difficult for you to admit your mistake?" Shang Xingzhou calmly looked at him and slowly loosened his grip. No one stepped forward because the two were still very close. They only needed to stretch out their hands to touch each other. Chen Changsheng then said a few words. "In a mausoleum of books, I told Sir that perhaps only at the final moment would you discover what you truly want. Just now was the final moment. Sir asked me why I arranged this match, and this is the answer. I want to ask Sir to face yourself. Perhaps it's rather ugly, but it's true. You don't want to kill me, you've never wanted to kill me, because you know you're wrong. Since 20 years ago, everything you've done regarding me has been wrong. At the very beginning, this part was even more intense. Chen Changsheng wanted to be like Ma Jingtao, incessantly yelling at Shang Xingzhou, 'Kill me. If you have the ability, kill me.' Saliva flew everywhere. After careful thought, I changed it to this because I think it's very beautiful this way." The title of the chapter was intentional. It's not wrong. To be continued. Chapter 76. I recommend to everyone Lord Blacksky Demon God's new work. The title of the book is The Infected, a connection between the creation era /BK/Cage/141404448. The title of the chapter is from Qin Shi Huang's theme song, "The Earth is Beneath My Feet." In the last few days, the Southern diplomatic mission had used the Grand Examination as an excuse to come north, so Yurong had brought South Stream Temple with her in a display of force. The capital and Luoyang were in turmoil, the imperial court, and the plains were filled with thunderbolts. Chen Changsheng had never expressed his stance, quietly sitting in his stone room to comprehend the sword. Only today did he suddenly exert his strength, using this momentum to force Shang Xingzhou to agree to a battle with him. This entire process had truly been exhausting. Of course, he wanted to win this battle, but more importantly, the battle itself was the most important thing. He wanted to use this battle to force Shang Xingzhou to the edge of a cliff, force him into the most extreme of situations. He wanted Shang Xingzhou to truly feel the danger of defeat, to feel strange gazes, to feel the perplexed prospect of everything turning to nothing. Only in this way could Shang Xingzhou face himself, see the small figure hidden beneath his blue Taoist robe, see his heart that he had never seen. Just what was Shang Xingzhou thinking? Just how did he view everything related to Chen Changsheng? Chen Changsheng's words were his opinion of Shang Xingzhou. You are not willing to admit your wrongs, but you already knew that you were wrong. So in these last few years, you have never tried to do it yourself, only had the people of the Tianhai clan and the people of the great western continent kill me. This is because you simply do not want to kill me, even though you yourself are not aware of this fact. This view was actually somewhat reasonable. With Shang Xingzhou's cultivation level, his will that was like an old pine tree. Even if the Pope had left behind many restrictions before his death, even if Chen Changsheng had many helpers and was extremely careful, if he truly wanted to kill Chen Changsheng, how could he have spent so many years without any results? The White Tiger Divine General's actions were even more of a joke. This was the truth that Chen Changsheng wanted Shang Xingzhou to see, his true intentions. Shang Xingzhou silently looked at Chen Changsheng, his eyes very cold. It was like he was not looking at a real person, a living being, but a few weeds in a pot of sour fruit. Were Chen Changsheng's words true? In those years in Xining Village's old temple, it was Yuren who had raised Chen Changsheng with porridge and fish, and it was also Yuren who had educated Chen Changsheng. Shang Xingzhou wasn't close to Chen Changsheng and rarely disciplined him. So it wasn't because he didn't have feelings for Chen Changsheng, but because he was afraid of having feelings? These years, the entire world knew that he didn't like Chen Changsheng, but they didn't understand why. So those mockery, contempt, and disdain weren't real. He just wanted to keep his distance so that he could harden his heart. But in the end, Chen Changsheng still became that shadow on his Dao heart. How could he erase that shadow? How could he fill it up? He couldn't kill Chen Changsheng either, because those things had already happened. Or it was just as Chen Changsheng said. Apologize? Several gazes landed on Shang Xingzhou's face. Shang Xingzhou looked at Chen Changsheng and laughed. His smile was filled with undisguised mockery. You think too much. Saying this, he turned and walked out of the Orthodox Academy. His green Taoist robe was soaked with blood, looking like a black lotus that was slowly swaying in the wind. Looking at the fading figure, Chen Changsheng remained silent and didn't say anything. Until the end, no one admitted defeat, but everyone knew who had won and who had lost. He had defeated his master, the most powerful person in the world. He had not only obtained victory in this battle, but also victory in this spiritual struggle between master and disciple. No matter how one looked at it, this was an extraordinary matter, the glory of a king. Logically speaking, the ruins of the Maple Forest Pavilion, no, the entire Orthodox Academy should be brimming with a cheerful air. But there was none, because Chen Changsheng maintained his silence, tightly pursing his lips, so tightly that they appeared rather pale. The person closest to him was Su Yorong. Seeing his silence, the joy in Su Yorong's eyes gradually faded, replaced by a very faint pity. I never imagined that you were actually so good at talking. She smiled as she spoke, wanting to comfort his current mood. Today, Chen Changsheng had said many things to Shang Xingzhou, and under the agitation of his emotions, his words seemed rather sharp. That's because you normally don't talk much with him, or else you would know that he's most skilled at rebuking people. Tang 36's eyebrows danced as he spoke. He had no intention of mocking Chen Changsheng, and his face was filled with pride. He then turned his head and impatiently asked, "Do you want me to invite you?" Tang 36 did not understand his meaning. Tang 36 said, "The fight is already over, so what are you still standing there for? Hurry up and leave. I don't plan on inviting you to a meal." He was the superintendent of the Orthodox Academy, so he naturally had the right to welcome or expel a guest. The problem was that these two words of his were directed at Wang Jizhe. Not even Emperor Taizong or the Tianhai Divine Empress would use such an impatient tone with Wang Jizhe, and no one would use the word pestle with Wang Jizhe. Wang Jizhe shook his head, then turned and walked out of the Orthodox Academy. Who are you putting on that calm and relaxed appearance for? Didn't you still lose? Tang 36 spat on the ground. Wang Po walked up to Chen Changsheng and examined his face. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, he bid farewell. From start to finish, there had been no conversation, no thanks. He was just this indifferent. That year in Xuanyang City, last year in Wenshui City, and this year in the capital, it had all been like this. Chen Changsheng turned to Su Yorong and said, "I won." Su Yorong looked at him with an admiring gaze and said, "Very impressive. Chun Changsheng was quiet for a while, then said, "I didn't cry." Su Yurong wiped the dust from his face and said with some heartache, "This is also very extraordinary." Chun Changsheng gazed into the distance. The academy wall over there had already collapsed. The bright yellow imperial robe was extremely striking in the gloomy weather. Yurim was standing there. Hunterflower's Lane was deathly still. The crowd had been so shocked by the final result that they couldn't speak. No one left, partly because they were too shocked, and partly because the gate of the Orthodox Academy was still closed. The Emperor and the Pope were currently talking inside. After this battle, no one could stop this pair of senior and junior brothers from meeting. But almost an hour had passed. Just what were they talking about? The heavy gate of the Orthodox Academy slowly opened. Chun Changsheng walked out. His dagger was tied. His hair was somewhat messy. His body was covered in dust and blood. His eyes were somewhat red. He seemed very tired, even in a sorry state. But no one dared to think so. Su Yurong walked on his left. Tang 36 was behind him. Linghai Zhuang solemnly bowed, paying respects to His Holiness, the Pope. The priests of the Li Palace all prostrated and bowed. At first, it was rather sparse, but it gradually became more concentrated and orderly. More and more people prostrated on the ground. There were Orthodoxy cavalry and black armor cavalry. The ministers of the court also prostrated. The 10-some princes silently looked at each other, but in the end, they still slowly prostrated. Chun Changsheng walked out of the lane. One by one, the crowd prostrated, like a tide, drowning the capital, reaching the entire continent. To be continued, Chapter 77. Many thanks to Reader 12 of the bookstore, a string of asterisk 29 for the reminder. As for the imperial design or the imperial design, I wrote it completely incorrectly in this volume. I very sincerely apologize. In addition, I suddenly realized today that I had even forgotten that Wang Pa had lost an arm. Back then, I had written it on purpose. Everyone knew that we were pursuing the aesthetics of a one-armed saber king. All right, I don't know if I wrote anything particularly wrong in the previous chapters. In any case, I'll apologize here. Again, this time, I'll cover my face. Tang 36 did not leave with Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong. He stood in front of the Orthodox Academy's gate, watching as the dense crowd receded like a receding tide. Hunterflower's Lane quickly regained its calm. Su Muiyu led the teachers and students of the Orthodox Academy back. As they gazed at the ruins of the Maple Forest Pavilion, the collapsed walls, the messy forest, and the clear scars of battle, they imagined that heaven-shaking battle that had taken place not too long ago. The crowd couldn't help but feel rather strange, like they were dreaming. Of course, this was a beautiful dream because the Orthodox Academy was currently on the Li Palace's side. Su Muiyu paid no attention to the rippling emotions of the teachers and students, nor was he in a hurry to arrange for repairs. He was more concerned about something else. Is everything all right? He stared into Tang 36's eyes and asked. I saw that his eyes were very red. The he in this sentence was naturally referring to Chun Changsheng. Su Muiyu was worried that his injuries were too severe. Tang 36 spread out his hands in speechlessness, thinking, do I have to tell you about Chun Changsheng and the Emperor crying on each other's heads? In the quiet side hall, the water fell into the pond, making a tinkling sound. The ladle floated on the surface of the pond in a disorderly manner, like an unmanned boat in the wilderness. Wang Jitsu's gaze left the pool and looked out of the hall. The sky had not yet darkened, and in the light of the sun, the scenery was extremely clear, but he did not see Taoist Wu. There was a smear of white in the world, extremely pure and holy, like snow and also like a lotus. It was Su Yurong. She stood in front of the Great Hall of Light, tilting her head and peering inside. She looked very cute. Linghai Zhuang and the others accompanied her, silently preparing for battle. A few years ago, such a scene had already occurred. When Chun Changsheng returned from Mount Han, heavily injured, he conversed with the Pope in that quiet hall. At that time, Su Yurong was ready to strike at any time. Today, it was clear that she was ready to strike at any time. Even if the person sitting opposite Chun Changsheng today was Wang Jitsu. In the Orthodox Academy, Qin Changsheng was on the verge of being cut down by Shang Xingzhou's sword. Su Yurong was forced to act, but she was stopped by Wang Jitze. However, Wang Jitze admired her response at that time. If he was not wrong, that should be the natural stream divine finger. What I admire the most is that she didn't spend all her time and energy on Big Brother saber art. You're the same. Wang Jitze's words were extremely sincere. This was because he knew very well how terrifying the having blade technique was. It was not only because he was Zhou Dufu's sworn brother. This was something that the entire continent knew, something that had already been recorded in the history books. Qin Changsheng and Su Yurong didn't know? Of course they knew. That year, when he and Wang Po were walking along the banks of the Luo River, he had displayed Zhou Dufu's blade intent, and Wang Po had used it to break through and kill Nantai with a single blade. Now, the having blade technique was in his and Su Yurong's hands. With the having blade technique, they could inherit Zhou Dufu's legacy and very possibly become the second strongest expert under the starry sky. If it were any other cultivator, how could they resist this temptation? They would assuredly strenuously train in that blade technique every day, spending all their time and even their entire lives on it. But Qin Changsheng did not do this, and neither did Su Yurong. Other than the time they had spent together in the mausoleum of books, they had never met up specifically to cultivate the having blade technique. They would even often forget about this matter. The having blade technique is too fierce. I feel somewhat uncomfortable. This was the explanation Qin Changsheng gave Wang Jitze. He thought it over, then added, and we have our own Taoist techniques. That's also very good. This answer was very calm, originating from self-confidence. This was what Wang Jitze admired the most, and also what puzzled him. From the mausoleum of books to the sword pool to the garden of Zhou, he had encountered so many fortuitous encounters, but none of them had been able to change Qin Changsheng's mind. Who could treat the heavenly tome monoliths as stone pearls and casually wear them on their wrists? He and Su Yurong were so young, so just where did their self-confidence come from that allowed them to face this world so calmly and unhurriedly? This world is ours, and it is also yours, but in the end, it will be yours. Wang Jitze looked at him and said, I originally believed that you were still young, that you could wait for us to grow old, that there was no need to take such risks. Qin Changsheng understood that he was explaining why he had accepted Shang Xingzhou's invitation to appear in the capital. He didn't know what to say, because the person explaining to him was called Wang Jitze. This fact truly was very easy to make one feel perplexed and helpless. Su Yurong turned to look at the black eaves in the depths of the hall. After confirming that the conversation in the quiet hall had gone smoothly, she naturally would not break through the stone walls and ignite her phoenix flames. Linghai Zhuang and the others also dispersed. At this moment, she heard Wang Jitze's words. Of course, this was also because Wang Jitze wanted her to hear them. These words caused her brows to rise like flames prepared to burn the heavens. A figure entered her line of sight. It seems that your fighting spirit has not completely disappeared. Mou smiled at her and said, It's been so many years, but you're still so warlike. Other than people like her, Prince Qinlu, and the state of Ping, who had grown up together, very few people knew of Su Yurong's true personality. Su Yurong looked at her and said, In your eyes, I also see only dissatisfaction. You and I have made countless preparations, but in the end, all of them came to nothing. It's hard not to feel a little uncomfortable. As Mou spoke, she shrugged her shoulders, appearing particularly unconcerned. It was such a simple sentence, but who knew how much bloodshed was hidden behind it? If not for Qin Changsheng's seemingly naive and foolish arrangements, perhaps the capital really would have flowed with rivers of blood today. Your little man truly isn't bad. Mou sighed, but it's a pity for Lord Wang. Su Yurong jeered. Do you really think he's like in the books? Back in the Imperial Palace, she was still young, and Mou was already a young girl. When they were studying, they had been infatuated with Wang Jitze countless times. There were far too many young girls like this in the world. In their view, Lord Wang was assuredly living on the clouds, gathering dew for food. If they really saw him, they would know that such an exiled immortal did not exist. He was a rather pitiful, even boring old man who knew how to compromise. Just as Mou and Su Yurong were discussing Wang Jitze heard a sentence. This sentence was a response to his previous explanation. It was unyielding and direct. Since this world is fated to be ours, why don't you retreat? Must the young wait? If we wait too long, we will also become boring old men like you. Then won't this world always be your world? It was not Chun Changsheng, nor was it Tang 36. The speaker was Linghai Zhuang. Wang Jitze glanced at him and recognized him as an archbishop. These so-called prefects of the orthodoxy were not even worthy of his attention. But there was one matter that, once it fell into his eyes, was hard to ignore. Linghai Zhuang was very young. Of the orthodoxy's prefects, he was the youngest. Tang 36 had once said this. Youth was justice. Wang Jitze thought it over, then said, that's reasonable. A carriage drove out of the Li Palace. The somewhat shabby and deformed wheels rolled over the hard stone slabs of the plaza, the sound of friction rather unpleasant to hear. The blood on the slabs had long since been washed clean. Daoist Wu's furious shouts came from the carriage. I'll kill all of you. You bastards, you dare treat this old man like this. No one responded to Daoist Wu's curses. There was not a single person. The plaza had been cleared out long ago. This was the Li Palace's expression of respect. Linghai Zhuang stood under the eaves, calmly gazing at the carriage as it drew further and further away. And Hua stood at his side, thinking about what she had done today. As she listened to these curses, her face paled and her expression became somewhat helpless. Daoist Wu's anger stemmed from his defeat, but it was also because he had not felt any respect in the Li Palace. Logically speaking, regardless of victory or defeat, an elder of his generation should be respected. Moreover, he represented Wang Jitze, but he did not. From Chun Changsheng to Su Yurong, from Linghai Zhuang to Enhua, and then to Wang Pe and Mou outside, none of them expressed this attitude. Perhaps this represented the end of an era. That era, Wu Daozi was very angry, or rather, very disappointed. But Wang Jitze was very calm and could even be said to be gratified, because he felt a kind of power today. It was a power that he was once very familiar with, but gradually faded away after the great Zhou Empire was founded. That kind of power was a bit rough, easily displeasing. There were no rules, but there was an extremely lively life force, extremely moving. 1,000 years ago, the world was in chaos, the imperial court collapsed, and the demon race went south. The people had no way to make a living, and there were bones on the road. Then, wildflowers bloomed. Zhou Dufu, Chun Xuanba, Li Jiexing, Shang Xingzhou, King Chu, Ding Chongshan, Limir, Qinzhong, Yugong, those people in the Lingyan Pavilion, and him. They were all very young at that time. But who had they ever respected? Who was he afraid of? As it turned out, that era had not ended. It was still that era, the age of youth. To be continued. Chapter 78. Wang Jitze left the capital, not knowing when he would next come out of Sangarama Temple. Shang Xingzhou also returned to Luoyang and didn't leave the Monastery of Eternal Spring for many years. Before this, he had a conversation with Yuren in the Imperial Palace. The first thing Yuren said to him was, when the Holy Maiden entered the palace that night, I promised her nothing. That night, Prince Chen Lu traveled through the night to Luoyang. Shang Xingzhou remained silent until today. From a certain perspective, he had fallen into Su Yurong's trap. Su Yurong was borrowing power to attack the heart. Yuren's meaning was very clear. If you really do suspect me, you can ask me first. Shang Xingzhou did not ask. He had given Su Yurong a reason for this in the Mausoleum of Books. Luoyang did not receive a letter from the Imperial Palace. Many days had passed, enough time to write a heartfelt letter, but Yuren had not said a single word. Yuren asked, if Emperor Taizong were still alive, what would he do? Will he take the initiative to write letters? From the time Xining Village's old temple was even smaller, Shang Xingzhou had begun to teach Yuren how to become an outstanding monarch. In Shang Xingzhou's view, and It was also publicly acknowledged by the entire continent. The most outstanding sovereign in history was naturally Emperor Taizong. He hoped that Yuren would become the second Emperor Taizong, so he naturally had to learn or imitate him. This was the case every day. When faced with the most complex and difficult of choices, it was very normal for Yuren to imagine Emperor Taizong's actions. The answer was obvious. Emperor Taizong would never write a letter to Luoyang. "You did well," Shang Xingzhou said to Yuren, a gratified expression on his face. "But you haven't done enough. Emperor Taizong should be even more remorseful now, perhaps even issuing an edict of self-condemnation." The wind and snow had stopped long ago, and spring had returned to the earth. The square of the imperial palace was wet from the melting snow, and from afar, one could see the new greenery in the cracks of the stones. Yuren gazed at the figure gradually vanishing into the twilight and thought of their previous conversation. He softly said, "I am far inferior to grandfather." He was not as good as his grandfather in many ways, such as hypocrisy. For example, he had no way of resolving the issue between Shang Xingzhou and Chen Changsheng. Teacher is getting old. Yuren thought of the white hair at Shang Xingzhou's temples and felt rather downcast. Eunuch Lin looked at His Majesty's profile and suddenly felt a little sad. From the time he entered the palace during the reign of the previous emperor until now, he was already old and had seen many things. However, he was increasingly unable to understand the thoughts of the younger generation, whether it was the young emperor or the young pope. They all deeply respected elders like Wang Zhizi and Shang Xingzhou. However, they had to defeat their opponents. They had to defeat them completely. Why was that? Today, Mount Amo had collapsed. Ji Mountain became the highest peak in the suburbs of the capital. The Prince of Zhongshan gazed at the distant setting sun and narrowed his sharp eyes. As soon as the Orthodox Academy had a result, he left Hundred Flowers Lane. He didn't want to kneel to Chen Changsheng, and he didn't want to stay in the capital anymore. Now that Shang Xingzhou had admitted defeat, the days of the Chun family's princes would become more and more difficult. He decided to return to his county and wait for the imperial edict. If he left without an imperial edict, he could be accused of treason by the imperial court at any time. He did not want to give a reason. The Prince of Xiong walked to the summit. As he gazed at the warm glow of twilight, he sighed. He was also waiting for an imperial decree, but the contents of this decree were different from the Prince of Zhongshan's. The Prince of Zhongshan asked, "Did you not expect the venerable Taoist to lose?" "I have served the venerable Taoist for 10-some years, and I truly did not expect it." The Prince of Xiong placed his hands on his belt and gasped for breath. But no matter who won or lost, it was still not a matter for the three of them. There was a faint undertone to these words. The Prince of Zhongshan sneered. "One temple in Xining rules the world." The White Emperor's words are truly correct. The Prince of Xiong sighed. "The world. I can't even figure out whose world it belongs to." The Prince of Zhongshan glanced at him and asked, "You're still not willing to admit that that person is our younger brother?" The Prince of Xiong said nothing, but his fingers sank into the fat on his waist. The Prince of Zhongshan slightly creased his brow. "Just because he was born of that woman?" The Prince of Xiong rebuked. "That's imperial mother." The Prince of Zhongshan angrily retorted, "Hypocritical to the extreme, truly boring. In this aspect, you've really learned from grandfather." The Prince of Xiong bitterly smiled. Alas, imperial father did not think this way. The Prince of Zhongshan jeered. That was because imperial father did not like grandfather. At this moment, the imperial decree finally arrived. The Prince of Zhongshan received the decree he wanted. It was obvious that the emperor also did not want him to stay in the capital and curse every day. But the Prince of Xiong did not receive the decree he wanted. The emperor had left Prince Chunlu in the capital, but he had naturally used a different name. The Prince of Zhongshan patted the Prince of Xiong on the shoulder and left. The Prince of Xiong stood in the twilight. After a moment of silence, he descended the mountain. By the time he returned to the relay station, everyone had already received the news. The princess had cried so hard that she almost fainted. His other sons and daughters also had tear stains on their faces, though a hint of joy would occasionally flash through their eyes. When I gave him a name, I didn't think of a good one. That leaving character is inauspicious. The Prince of Xiang sat on the palace armchair and looked at his children in the room. He spent the majority of his life in the capital as a hostage and made many contributions to our clan. I don't need all of you to be grateful, but can I trouble all of you to be a little more sincere when you play the role of grief? Hearing these words, everyone looked at each other, perhaps out of embarrassment or nervousness. Some people actually began to cry, and then there was an endless stream of sorrowful wails. The Prince of Xiang was rather annoyed by this. Holding his belt, he walked into the rear courtyard of the relay station and boarded the royal carriage with the help of a servant girl. The carriage was covered in a thick blanket. There were delicious fruits and charming beauties. A very fat man was surrounded by delicacies and beauties. If one looked carefully, one would realize that this man was very similar to the Prince of Xiang, almost identical. The Prince of Xiang walked up to the man and sighed. I say, you have to act a little more realistically. After all, I'm still an expert of the divine domain. I should at least have a little imposing manner, right? The man grimaced. Your Highness, if I could cultivate to your level, would I still need to be a substitute? The Prince of Xiang helplessly asked. Then what about imposing manner? The man sternly replied. Your Highness is just such an amiable person. To the north of the Tsong Province Army headquarters, to the west of the Starfall Mountains, was a grassland. This grassland was the homeland of the elf race. Because of the war between the demons, demi-humans, and humans, it had long since become desolate, but it had become a paradise for monsters. Monsters rarely seen anywhere else on the continent could be seen here. Of course, this also meant danger and chaos. But several years ago, a monster brought an earth monkey to this place. He quickly became the emperor of this grassland. And then, someone else came. To be continued. Chapter 79. Students, it's not the end yet. Although the first few chapters are really well written and meaningful, there's still a lot of important parts to this story. First, we have to conquer the world in a tacky way. Then, are we not going to explore other worlds? Also, I made a mistake in yesterday's chapter. After I updated it, I was reminded by a friend and changed it. I don't know if any of you saw it. If you did, please pretend you didn't see it. This monster was Chusu. In White Emperor City, he had been forced to retreat again and again by Su Yurong. He was simply no match for her, but that was because of their mutual engendering and restraining. In truth, in the world below the divine domain, he had the ability to threaten any expert, whether it was Chun, Changsheng, or Qiushanjun. This desolate and uninhabited plain did not have any excessively ancient or powerful monsters. Even if there were some herds of beasts that were difficult to deal with, they were easily subdued by the earth monkey. After several years, he very quickly became the sovereign of this plain. Perhaps because the influence of the previous sect master's strand of soul on his body was growing weaker and weaker, or perhaps because he enjoyed the life of a sovereign, Chusu never left the plains again, much less continued to take revenge on Su Li's descendants. Occasionally, late at night, he would sit at the highest point of the meadow and look at the south in silence for a long time. It was not because he missed her. He definitely did not miss the cold and damp days at the bottom of the cliff in the longevity sect. Rather, it was because he was fighting against his instinctive desires. When he was created, his soul had been implanted with an indelible desire to kill and a bone-deep hatred for anyone related to the name Su Li. If he couldn't vent this desire and hatred through violent actions, it was very likely that he would be devoured by the Yellow Springs art. But too many elves had died on this plain, and the soil was soaked in blood. Very few people passed through. He had no one to kill, so he could only learn to endure and learn to fight against this instinctive desire. One night, he was sitting at the highest point of the meadow when he suddenly sensed something and looked up at the sky. Among the many stars in the sky, one of them became extremely bright, at least a few hundred times brighter than usual. It was very eye-catching. Chusu's face paled, and not even those black hairs could conceal it. He didn't know if it was because of the starlight or some other reason. How is this possible? As he gazed at that dazzling star, Chusu's mind was in turmoil. Another person has actually entered the divine domain. Why isn't that person me? He roared angrily and smashed his hands on the ground. sending grass and mud flying everywhere. No, absolutely not. Chusu's unpleasant and hoarse voice echoed through the dark plains, the entire world able to sense his unwillingness and resentment. All of a sudden, he stopped shouting and sniffed around like a dog in the night air. With a rustling, the earth monkey appeared on the meadow, using its forelegs to crawl to Chusu's side. Chusu had a hunchback and a short stature. He wore a tattered black robe, and his entire body exuded a rancid odor. The more beautiful the starry sky, the uglier Chusu was, especially when his agitated, waving hands were illuminated by the starlight. His hands were covered in scales and covered in black fur. His sharp claws were covered in filth and flesh that had rotted for who knew how many years. Anyone, even demonic beasts, would reveal feelings of disgust or fear when looking at such a monster. The earth monkey did not. It looked at Chusu with eyes full of confusion, trust, and worship. There's a treasure. Chusu looked at a certain place in the darkness and spoke in a low and hoarse voice. The brightest star in the night sky represented that an expert had entered the divine domain, just like how Wang Pa had broken through by the Luo River. All things in the world would sense this, especially the laws or existences above the divine domain. Chusu could clearly sense the ripples of divine qi. He could sense it so clearly because the divine aura was in the grassland, not far away. The true body of that divine qi was probably in a state of slumber, or perhaps in a weakened state. To greedy cultivators, this was an irresistible temptation, let alone the yellow springs art that Chusu cultivated. Without hesitation, he burrowed into the ground, heading toward that place in the darkness. The earth monkey looked around the meadow and let out a low whimper as a warning. Then it stood up, peed, and followed Chusu into the ground. Several dozen li away, there was a rocky mountain. It looked very ordinary on the outside, but the rocks on the inside were red. In the depths of a certain cave, the walls were painted with simple and unadorned murals from ancient times. The light was dim, and one could faintly make out a stone platform. On the stone platform was a bird's nest formed from branches and soft grass, within which lay a simple and unadorned little bird. This cave was several li deep, its structure extremely complex, and there were countless forks in the road. Not even the most formidable monster could reach the bottom. Logically speaking, the gray bird should be very safe. But even the most complex structure could not stop those creatures that could burrow into the earth. As he gazed at that unremarkable gray bird, Chusu's body began to tremble, the stench from his tattered black robe growing thicker and thicker. He did not fear a being of the divine domain, nor was he disappointed that he had found the wrong target. He was excited. He felt that his rough fate had finally come to an end. The word lucky had finally fallen on his head. When the earth monkey followed the trail Chusu had left behind and emerged from the ground, it saw this sight. When its gaze fell on that gray little bird, it instantly went blank. To put it another way, even its extremely experienced, extremely sinister, and shameless self was dumbfounded. The earth monkey recognized that gray little bird. Let alone a mere change in shape. Even if it had been reduced to dust, it would still not dare to forget it. This bird was the golden-winged great pung. On the plains of the unsetting sun, countless monsters revered it. Just like the dragon race and the phoenix, the golden-winged great pung was an innately divine creature. Chusu was keenly aware of the benefits of eating a golden-winged great pung. It was obvious that this golden-winged great pung was in the midst of a long awakening and had no ability to protect itself. Chusu could not let this chance slip by. The earth monkey was also keenly aware of this. So no matter how crafty and sinister it was, it could not think of a way to stop Chusu. At this moment, the gray little bird opened its eyes. With a glance, it knew what that putrid monster wanted to do. There was no fear or pleading in the young Peng's eyes, only indifference. An indescribably terrifying pressure appeared in the cave. "Do you think that I will be frightened by you?" Chusu's voice was very hoarse and unpleasant to hear. The young Peng's eyes were brimming with anger. But just as Chusu thought, it was at a crucial moment in the awakening of its soul and could not move. A howl brimming with ruthlessness and grievance resounded through the cave. You and I are the same, both proud and cold-poisoned seeds that have never liked this world. We have no master, no friends, so naturally no one will be willing to save us. This being the case, why don't we become one and have another contest with this world? Chusu solemnly said to the young Peng. The young Peng rolled its eyes at him like he was an idiot. A streak of fire suddenly appeared in the night sky. The streak of fire pierced into the rock. The earth quaked and lava surged, its heat indescribable. The mountain collapsed, a cloud of dust rising. Chusu sensed a familiar chi and recalled the pain from several years ago, his face turning abnormally pale. A petite figure walked out of the dust, its wings slowly folding up and then vanishing. The young Peng cried out at this figure, seeming both wronged and like a child acting like a spoiled child. Su Yurong reached out and caressed it. The young Peng seemed very comfortable. With a few grunts, it closed its eyes and continued to sleep. So if it was you, at this sight, Chusu sorrowfully said, all the good things in the world are yours. Is there any justice in this? Su Yurong thought this over, then said, it really does seem rather unfair. Chusu sensed her chi and suddenly began to laugh. His laughter was very unpleasant to hear, his smile even more so. So it wasn't you. To be continued. Chapter 80. So it was you is very easy to understand, but the following so it wasn't you was rather inexplicable and incomprehensible. Anyone else would probably be confused and think that Chusu was a madman, but Su Yurong understood his meaning. She gave a faint smile and said nothing. The smile on Chusu's face gradually faded as he solemnly said, the fate between us is truly not shallow. A rancid odor wafted through the ruined mountain, as nauseating as his hoarse and unpleasant voice. Chusu was a monster of the longevity sect, while Su Yurong was the holy maiden of South Stream Temple. The longevity sect and South Stream Temple had an extremely deep relationship. If one truly wanted to talk about fate and the Tao, it truly was a very long story. Su Yurong was not in the mood to listen to this story, and Chusu did not have the time. The ground trembled, the scattered red rocks bouncing about on the surface of the grassland. A dense mass of red dots of light appeared on the perimeter of the grassland, appearing like scattered specks of blood. These red dots were the eyes of the monsters. Several hundred monsters had used the cover of the darkness to surround the mountain. I can't beat you. Chusu looked at Su Yurong and shrilly said, but I have many subordinates. Are you afraid? Just as he had said to the golden-winged great Peng, he had no teachers, relatives, fellow disciples, friends, and not even a master. He was an exclusive species and also a poisonous species. When he came to the grassland, he suddenly had many loyal and devoted subordinates. He was very unfamiliar with this feeling, but he liked it very much. He felt like he was the emperor of the grassland, that with a wave of his hand, a magnificent army would follow. He wanted to show off to Su Yurong. The earth monkey lay at his side, its head lowered, its body trembling in fear. Chusu was very proud. Su Yurong calmly gazed at him, somewhat pitying him. Chusu was very angry, but he did not have time to order the monsters to attack. The cry of a crane resounded from the distant night sky. The monsters raised their heads in fear, as if they had been turned into statues. The golden-winged great Peng opened its eyes and glanced at the night sky. Sensing that familiar chi, it scornfully turned its head. She's not even married yet, but you're already being ridden by him every day. Do you have no shame? In the breeze, the white crane landed in the disorderly mountains. He wore a light green Taoist robe, and his tightly bound black hair was tied into a simple ebony Taoist bun. He was no different from several years ago. Qin Changsheng was still dressed in such a simple manner that no one would associate him with the Pope. After Qin Changsheng appeared, the entire world became quiet. The demonic beasts retreated cautiously in fear, not even daring to make a sound as they rubbed against the grass. Perhaps it was because his Taoist robes had too much of the scent of black frost dragons, or perhaps it was because of the reverence of some ancient demonic beasts. The root cause of the silence was Chusu's silence. He stared at Chun Changsheng's face for a long time and suddenly shouted, "It's not you either." Chun Changsheng said, "Yes, not me." Upon receiving confirmation, Chusu's mood became extremely good, and he found it hard to control his laughter. "Ha ha ha, it really wasn't you. I knew it couldn't be you." He pointed at Chun Changsheng's face and kept laughing and shouting until tears and snot flowed down. The reason he was so agitated, even losing his composure, was that Chusu was currently in a very complicated mood. He had noticed the changes in Chun Changsheng in the last few years. The star radiance in his 180 acupuncture points was almost non-existent, and his sword intent was barely visible under his blue Taoist robe. What did this mean? It meant that he was only half a step from the divine. For someone as young as Chun Changsheng to be so close to the divine domain, had there ever been such a person in history? Qin Xuanba. Yes, that person was not Chun Changsheng. But the current Chun Changsheng was no longer an opponent he could defeat. Chusa decided to flee. He laughed so exaggeratedly to hide his true intentions. His voice came to a screeching halt as his gray wings of flesh broke through the wind, the stench of blood wafting through the air. Chusu fled underground. Su Yorong's reaction had been a little slow, so she could not catch up, not even by igniting her phoenix fire. This was also the truth of the situation. Chusu vanished. Su Yorong did not pursue. In the darkness, the disorderly mountains and plains were pitch black. Only a very faint strand of spiritual sense drifted in the wind. Chusu had intentionally left this strand of spiritual sense for the earth monkey. He had lived with the earth monkey for the last few years and had already gotten used to its existence. He had raised it like a dog, and even at this tense moment, he did not want to abandon it. Suddenly, several li away, a mound of earth several zhang high rose from the plains. Under the starlight, the green grass was torn apart and black earth gushed out. Whoosh! A figure shot out of the mound like a pebble and was thrown several dozen zhang into the air. After a moment, the person crashed to the ground and groaned. It was Chusu's voice. Just what had happened? Chusu was also very confused. He lowered his head in fear and alarm and saw that something had bitten off half of his left foot. Soon after, he felt a chill and pain from his back. With a slight movement of his spiritual sense, he realized that the old wound Su Yorong had left on his wings of flesh had split open again. Fear would increase the intensity of pain. Chusu felt his scalp go numb from the pain coming from two places. Unable to control himself, he began to scream. Who? Who ambushed me? Rustling could be heard over the darkness of the plains. It was not the wind rustling the grass, nor was it a flood serpent burrowing into the ground. It was the sound of fur rubbing against grass. The earth monkey used its forelimbs to crawl under the mound and turned its head to the side, spitting. Pa, 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 pa. The earth monkey's spit contained blood and rotten flesh. It was you. Chusu was stunned by this sight. The earth monkey's thin body seemed to transform into a devil. He could not understand why it would suddenly betray him after all these years of mutual dependence. Even if his temper was a little bad, why did it have to want him dead? The earth monkey turned its head and glanced at Chusu. Chusu felt like he could see a terrifying smile in the monster's eyes. At this moment, Chun Changsheng's voice rang out, "Enough." The earth monkey stood up and eagerly ran back to Chun Changsheng's side, then turned its head to glance at Chusu. Only now did Chusu realize that this earth monkey was not crippled. It could actually walk on 2 feet. He knew that he was raising a fake dog, but only today did he realize that everything had been fake. The mental pain of being tricked and toyed with surpassed the pain from his wounds. You did all of this. He angrily yelled at Chun Changsheng, "I'll kill you." A fierce wind stirred, and a foul stench soared into the sky. The grass was dyed black, and the red rocks rustled to the ground. The tattered black clothes rustled in the wind. An awe-inspiring sword intent suddenly appeared, shattering the starlight. Several streams of blood shot out. To be continued. Chapter 81. Tonight, the starlight was extremely dazzling. After being sliced apart by the sword intent, it scattered in all directions, making the grassland even brighter. It was like it was daytime, illuminating everything. The blood was black, and when it fell on the grass, it hissed and stirred up a pungent mist. The grass began to visibly blacken. Howls and fierce winds howled as a terrifying chi disturbed the world. Dirt shot into the sky like a waterfall, and then it was crushed down by the awe-inspiring sword intent. After some time, it was finally quiet. Chusu stood on the spot with his head lowered. He had been born short and had a hunched back, and with his head lowered, he looked even more humble and pitiful. His black robe had become even more tattered, covered in blood and dust, and 2 large holes had appeared on the front of his body. These holes had been left by a sword, piercing through the scales and black fur covering his body and cutting open his ribs, from which blood flowed out. His gray wings of flesh weakly flapped twice, spraying out several spurts of black blood. His old wounds had been torn open. His severed shoulder was pierced by some grass, and his fake arm had been shredded by the sword chi. With him, as the center, the grassland for a radius of around 20 zhang was covered in blood, and the blood was poisonous. The monsters had been caught up in the battle, but not many had died. The vast majority of the monsters had fled under the Earth Monkey's lead. The starlight illuminated the night sky, but not a single sword had appeared. Those swords had already returned to their sheaths. The sheaths were tied to his belt. Chen Chongqing said nothing, only looked at him. It's all fake. Chusu raised his head and hoarsely said, Invincibility is fake. The legacy is fake. Defying the heavens to obtain the Tao is also fake, and even relying on each other for survival is fake. I only want to live, but my existence has no meaning, so even living is fake. I was born to be a tool for killing. As he spoke, he did not look at the Earth Monkey, nor did he look south. The longevity sect was in the south. Chun Changshang fell quiet for a while, then said, I was also born as a tool, but I think that since we exist, we naturally have our meaning. From a certain perspective, his background was very similar to Chusu's. Chusu shook his head. That's because you encountered a few people who could bestow meaning to your existence. Chun Chongqing thought about it and said, You're right. Chusu replied, So you are luckier than me, happier than me. Chun Chongsheng said, Yes, but this cannot be a reason. What reason? Naturally, it was a reason to do evil. A tragic life can be a spiritual treasure, but it can't be a debt that can be transferred to someone else. No matter how pitiful your childhood experience was, you still had to bear the responsibility when you grew up and became a homicidal maniac. Chusu had not committed any great evil in the last few years, but his hands had been stained with no small amount of blood. Chusu understood his meaning and knew that he would not be able to escape this calamity. He began to chuckle. If you were me, would you be Chusu or Chun Chongsheng? These were his last words in this world. His body split into more than a dozen pieces, scattering on the ground like broken building blocks. Black blood splashed everywhere, and a rotten and cold aura spread in all directions. Su Yurong stretched out her hand and unleashed a stream of flames. The flame glowed with a pure and holy golden color as it burned incessantly on the surface of the earth. It even followed the cracks and burned underground. When the black blood encountered the flames, it transformed into smoke that constantly sizzled. The rotten and cold chi was gradually purified, and one could faintly make out the wails of ghosts, extremely resentful and fearful. As the golden flames dwindled, Chun Chongsheng said, Perhaps to him, this is release. If he is still unwilling to accept death, how can his soul be at peace? Su Yurong raised her right hand and aimed it at him. There was a very small wound on his neck, and in the wound were several tiny black crystals. With his strength and Su Yurong watching from the side, he still needed to pay a price, a risk, if he wanted to completely kill a monster like Chusu. A light green light, brimming with a holy aura, emerged from Su Yurong's palm and landed on Chun Chongqing's neck. Those black crystals instantly melted like snowflakes in the blazing sun, and at the same time, the wound began to visibly heal. Su Yurong said, Logically speaking, you shouldn't be afraid of the Yellow Springs Arts invasion. but it's still best to be careful. Chen Changsheng replied, "Thank you." Su Yurong said, "May the sacred light be with you." Chen Changsheng sincerely replied, "Then I want to always stay at your side." These were words of love. Although he was very bad at saying words of love and was too serious, making him seem rather stupid, it was all the more moving. But Su Yurong did not react, seeming rather cold. Chen Changsheng didn't understand why, and just when he wanted to ask, he was interrupted. At some point, the earth monkey had appeared in front of him. It was kneeling on the ground and kissing the ground at his feet, appearing both reverent and passionate. Chen Changsheng suddenly realized a principle. Although the earth monkey was a monster renowned for being cunning, sinister, and terrifying, it was much easier to understand what it was thinking than to understand what a girl was thinking. When I stopped you from continuing, it wasn't because I didn't trust you, nor was it because I had a grudge against you. Chen Changsheng glanced at Su Yurong and said, "It wasn't that I sympathized with him. I just felt that there was no need." Back then, he had not been too fond of Hu 32's arrangements. Chisu truly had sought death, but why did he have to die from betrayal? His words were meant for the earth monkey, but they were also an explanation for Su Yurong. He was not sure if Su Yurong's current calmness, indifference, had anything to do with this matter. The fire on the ground was gradually extinguished, but the fire in the ground was still burning. The light of the fire seeped through the cracks, looking like frozen lightning. It had a soul-stirring beauty to it. Su Yurong's gaze passed over the fire and fell into the distance. She asked, "You're sure that he will leave through here?" Chen Changsheng replied. That year, before he left Blue Pass, he met with Qin Shou. The agreed mark was the same as this one. As a divine general of the Mount Song army that had been forcefully pushed up by the orthodoxy, the meaning behind that person's meeting with Qin Shou was naturally very clear. Su Yurong asked, "That person's temper is so terrible, so why does he trust you so much?" Chen Changsheng replied, "That year, when you were in seclusion, I met with him." Su Yurong knew of this matter, but she had not expected it to have such a large effect on that person. With a gust of wind, the white crane landed at her side. She leaned against the crane's back and closed her eyes to rest. A few days ago, she had received the news and left Holy Maiden Peak. Tonight, she had received a message from the golden-winged Great Peng's spiritual sense and rushed over. She was already very tired. Chen Changsheng had returned from an even farther place, so he was even more tired than she was, but he could not sleep. He looked at the desolate rocky mountains in the distance and waited silently. Beyond that desolate mountain was the world of the demons. Who would return from that side tonight? Chusu formally bids farewell to everyone. When I first wrote this character, I wanted to write a contrasting version of Chen Changsheng, but not a contrasting version like Ning Ke and Long Qing. I wanted to highlight pure evil that did not require reason. However, I must admit that I did not write it very well. The greatest reason is that I did not have enough space to describe in depth. I vaguely remember that in the heroic novel, there was a pure evil character that was very well written, but that required a lot of words to be spent on it. If that was the case, then our story would become unbalanced, so there truly is a dilemma. In the next book, I want to design a plot that is more convenient to display, so I will attempt this aspect. Please do not look forward to it. To be continued. Chapter 82. Some friends are very expectant, some friends are very anxious, worried that choosing the heavens will become the work of our lives, because the sacred light continent is too far, the world is too big. I only said those words that day to comfort everyone. I really want to continue living with Changsheng in the book, but that's impossible. Choosing the heavens will end around the 5th month. The ending was decided 3 years ago when the book was first written. It's nothing new, but it's very much in line with our tastes. Please do not look forward to it. Be serious. Tonight's starlight was truly very bright. Those distant rocky mountains looked like steam buns made of white flour. No, those mountains were rather short, more like the white flour steamed bun sister song made in Xining Village. Chen Changsheng felt a little hungry, and then he remembered that he had been in a hurry to sleep and had not eaten for a day and night. Why was it so bright? Of course, it was because of that star. That star was dimming, but it was still many times brighter than usual. It meant that a cultivator had broken into the divine domain. Chusu was furious at this, but when he realized that this person was not Su Yorong or Chun Changsheng, he became a little happier. Just who was that person? Chun Changsheng and Su Yorong had not mentioned that person's name, but it was obvious that they knew who it was. As he gazed at the brightest star in the night sky, Chun Changsheng was rather confused and uneasy. Given that person's personality, he would rather die than ask for help, and now that he had successfully broken through, who would he be afraid of? That day, he was rafting on the Red River. He listened to the gloomy songs of the jings in the water and ate the little red fruits that Luo Luo fed him. His life was very happy. Then, the white crane came, carrying a message. This message had first come from the bear tribe. A spy from the bear tribe had delivered it to a medicine merchant, who then brought it to the Mount Song Army headquarters and personally delivered it to Chinchou. The message was a date and a line that seemed to be scribbled without any pattern. Chun Changsheng took a small piece of paper from his bosom and stacked it with the map in his sea of consciousness. If the message was correct, that person would probably appear here tonight. The grassland under the starlight was extremely quiet. The earth monkey sensed Chun Changsheng's mood and quietly lay in front of him, not making a single sound. The monsters had retreated far away, but they did not dare to leave. They nervously looked at the earth monkey, ready to receive orders at any time. It appeared that the true master of this grassland was not Chusu, but this earth monkey. As it gazed at that bright star, the earth monkey narrowed its eyes in confusion. Although it was cunning and sinister, it was not an intelligent being after all. It did not know how to cultivate, so it was naturally unable to understand this phenomenon. Suddenly, the earth monkey straightened its body and gazed at the distant mountain, wariness and unease in its eyes. In the next moment, it quickly circled behind Chun Changsheng and only revealed its head. It let out a low roar towards the night sky. Su Yorong stood up and looked in that direction, saying, "They're here." The white crane flapped its wings and flew up into the night sky, ready to provide support. The night wind suddenly picked up, whistling, and the weeds fell to the south. The surroundings were flat and there were no trees, but for some reason, there was a rustling sound. It was the sound of the wind rustling the paper. In the bright starry sky, a huge kite floated over from the northern night sky. There was a string attached to the bottom of the huge kite, which seemed to be tied to a person. The kite flew over the white rocky mountain and arrived at the grassland bathed in starlight. With a snapping sound, the thread broke. The kite floated into the sky and gradually vanished, as if it had ascended to the starry sky and could no longer be found. The ground of the grassland trembled. That person landed in front of Chun Changsheng and Su Yorong. His face was covered by a piece of white paper. As it turned out, the rustling sound had not come from the huge kite, but from the white paper. Several black holes had been dug into the white paper, making it seem very frightening. Today, the paper was covered in specks of blood, making it seem even more sinister. He carried a spear in his hand, and his posture was very casual, like he was carrying a bag or a person. But the spear was very straight, just like his person. His body stood as straight as a ramrod, as if it would never fall. Xiao Zhang, once a member of the Proclamation of Liberation, was a madman, a madman, a madman of the experts of the middle generation. Many years ago, he had been pursued by the entire Great Zhou imperial court, and after several bloody battles, he was ultimately forced into the snowy plains. After which, there was no more news of him. No one had expected that when he next appeared, he had already broken through and become an expert of the divine domain. Starlight fell on Xiao Zhang's face, reflected off the white paper, and faintly glimmered. Chun Changsheng sensed his qi and confirmed that it was him who had just broken through, making him very happy. But before he had time to say anything, Xiao Zhang extended a hand to stop him. "I'm tired. I need a rest." After saying this, Xiao Zhang fell backwards. Even at this moment, he still maintained a perfectly straight posture and smashed straight into the ground. Bits of grass and mud flew into the air. Chun Changsheng froze. This sight made him recall the many scenes from many years ago when he and Su Li were fleeing south. After a while, he came to his senses. Removing the golden needle wrapped around his finger, he stabbed it into Xiao Zhang's neck and began to diagnose. To experts of the divine domain, the effects of the sacred light technique were rather weak. Su Yurong stood on the side, her brows slightly arched in thought. It was obvious that Xiao Zhang had been heavily injured. He had probably been pursued all this way by someone. Whether he'd been injured before or after breaking into the divine, it only proved that the pursuer was an incomparably powerful expert. Logically speaking, the best choice was to take Xiao Zhang and leave. Even the strongest opponent would find it very difficult to catch up to Su Yurong and the White Crane. But Qin Changsheng and Su Yurong did not do this. Perhaps it was because Xiao Zhang's injuries were too severe, or perhaps it was because they had already sensed the change in the darkness. The starlight dimmed and the darkness deepened, gloomy and cold, as if it had gained some sort of weight. The darkness gradually gathered in a certain place, overlapping, growing darker and darker until it became a true black mountain. These were 3 mountainous silhouettes. They appeared on the plains, separated by several hundred li, and just happened to surround them. The ground trembled as the grass struggled free of the restraints of the wind and began to dance. Gravel also danced with the grass. This was because these 3 mountainous black silhouettes were currently moving. In a very short time, they had arrived at a place not far in front of them. They were like true black mountains, several dozen zhang tall. High up were 2 torches that seemed to be blazing. These were their eyes. The earth monkey hid behind Qin Changsheng, a fearful expression on its face. Its eyes darted around, afraid but also not daring to leave. As she gazed at those mountainous black silhouettes, Su Yurong said, "When I was a child, I always believed that the 8 great mountain men were one person." The black mountain directly in front of them spoke. Its voice was a deep and droning sound, like the wind echoing through a cave. The coldness of the plains intensified, and the starlight grew even dimmer. Those mountainous black silhouettes were like the true darkness. In the eyes of Qin Changsheng and Su Yurong, they felt an unimaginable pressure. The 8 great mountain men, there are naturally 8 of them. It was rumored that in the olden days, the demon race had 8 supreme experts. To the people of the various tribes of the demon race, these 8 experts were 8 unreachable mountains, so they were called the 8 great mountain men. Only today did Qin Changsheng confirm that these demon experts really did exist and that they were true mountains. To be continued. Chapter 83. There had always been records of the 8 great mountain men in the Taoist canon. Why did Qin Changsheng only confirm their existence today? Why do the 8 great mountain men seem more like legends to the common people and cultivators of the human race? That was because the term had not appeared for many years. In the northern expedition, the 8 great mountain men have been the main fighting force of the demon race. In the Battle of Shualao City, they had played an extremely important role. The men of Mount Chilian and Mount Helan had died in battle, but after that, they had vanished. No one knew where they had gone, and as time passed, even their existence began to be suspected. Tonight, he had finally seen these legendary existences with his own eyes. The records that Qin Changsheng had read in the Book of Wei were naturally true. The appearance of the 8 great mountain men was closely related to Grand Scholar Tungus, and there was a high chance that it was also related to the Pope of the human race, so their names had the character man in them. Of course, as the ancient experts of the demon race, they were almost totemic existences. It was impossible to expect them to abandon their loyalty to the demon race and stand on the side of the human race. But why did they suddenly disappear back then? Why did he suddenly appear tonight? Qin Changsheng's divine sense fell upon the gigantic black shadow in the north. He sensed an invisible barrier, like the solidified darkness of the night. As expected of an ancient expert of the demon race, his chi was even more powerful and terrifying than that of the second-ranked demon General Hai Di in the Snowy Mountains. It was no wonder that despite successfully breaking into the divine domain, Xiao Zhang had still suffered such heavy injuries and remained unconscious. The frequency of the white paper on Xiao Zhang's face had already calmed down, and his breathing had stabilized. However, He had lost too much blood, and it was unknown when he would wake up. Qin Chang Sheng retracted his gaze and looked at the gigantic black shadow. He asked, "Senior, how do you address me?" He wanted to buy some time by talking, so he didn't expect the other party to answer. He didn't expect the other party's voice to ring out the next moment. The sound was still like the wind passing through a cave under the mountain, humming and echoing, with extremely complicated variations hidden in it. Mountain Man Rouge. The names of the 8 great mountain men were not recorded in detail in the Taoist canon, so Chun Changsheng could only guess at their names based on the pronunciation. He did not know that they were actually called Mountain Man Yenji. Soon after, 2 voices came from the southern plain. He learned that the other 2 demon experts were called Mountain Man Ichuan and Mountain Man Jinghua. Are the demons preparing to declare war tonight? Qin Changsheng looked at Mountain Man Yenji, his expression solemn. They were currently on the plains of the elf race. Over the past several thousand years, the demons, humans, and demi-humans had fought countless wars for the sake of this grassland and the elves who had once lived on this grassland. The black soil beneath the green weeds was completely watered by the blood of these different races, and its fertility came from death. To the 3 races, it was of great significance. Great significance often meant that it was sensitive, which also meant that it could easily lead to war. Therefore, the 3 races were very cautious about this grassland. Even if this grassland eventually belonged to the human race, it was more in name. The Great Zhou dynasty had never stationed troops here. Tonight, the 8 great mountain men, who had lived in seclusion for many years, had suddenly appeared, pursued Xiao Zhang to this plain, and had even surrounded Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong. It was clear that they were plotting something big. So how is this any different from a declaration of war? The war between our 2 races has never stopped. So why do we need to declare a new beginning? Mountain Man Yenji had spoken for a very long time, his voice rather muffled, but his pronunciation was very accurate, even somewhat resembling the accent of Luling's old estate. Chun Changsheng thought of the records in the Taoist scriptures and became even more curious about that vanished part of history. But he was also rather confused by this answer. Even the most ignorant of children, as long as they listened to stories in the tea houses and taverns, would know how the situation on the continent had changed in the last few years. The human race ushered in the era of blooming wildflowers, but the demon race was declining at an unimaginable speed. Whether it was the bitter cold weather, the sudden famine, or the sharp decrease in the number of combatants caused by the internal strife between various tribes, all of these were slowly pulling this powerful race that had once dominated the continent into the abyss. At this moment, the demons should be thinking about how to protect themselves, not attacking the humans. This had always been the young demon lord style of governance in the last few years. Even when the nobles of Shuilao City criticized him for being too conservative and even called him a disgrace, he had not changed. Why was Mountain Man Yenji so unyielding tonight? Chun Changsheng said, "You have no chance of victory." Mountain Man Yenji said, "But tonight might be the divine race's last chance." Chun Changsheng asked, "What chance?" Mountain Man Yenji said, "Your Holiness the Pope, you are the 4th person to successfully change fate. We also want to try." Chun Changsheng asked, "What do you want to change?" The life of a race is power, and the divine race's power is waning by the day. If they do not pull themselves together, they might be exterminated. Mountain Man Yenji said, "What we want to try is to change fate against the heavens." Chun Changsheng said, "Back in White Emperor City, I spoke with your noble lord. Something like extermination will not happen." Mountain Man Yenji shook his head. Rubble rustled down, gradually piling up on the surface of the grassland. No matter how warm the sunlight is, it cannot illuminate every corner of the world. No matter how benevolent your Holiness the Pope is, you will not bestow it upon the people of the divine race. You and the great Zhou Emperor are both Taoist Ji's students, and the Holy Maiden is the Tianhai Divine Empress's student. Shuilao City will not believe any of your promises. At this point in the conversation, the situation was extremely clear. Tonight, the demons wanted to kill not only Xiao Zhang, but also Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong. Xiao Zhang had spent the last few years on the snowy plains, not truly vanishing without a trace. Every once in a while, he would fight with the experts of the demon army. In these bloody battles, many demon experts, including several demon generals, had been defeated by him, and some had even been killed. He had also failed before and been pursued many times. But Shualao City had never sent its strongest expert capable of contending against a human expert of the divine domain to pursue Xiao Zhang. The primary reason was that they were worried that the great Zhou imperial court would use Xiao Zhang's whereabouts to lay a trap. Just like how Shang Xingzhou had used Chun Changsheng to lure the old demon lord into Mount Han and then set up an ambush. Only 10 some days ago, when Black Robe was observing the Southern Cross constellation, he was suddenly seized by a sudden impulse and sensed something. After some calculations, he came to an astonishing conclusion. The human race was about to gain another expert of the divine domain. In the Battle of White Emperor City, Biyang Hong and Wu Qiongbai had died in battle, and the demons had also paid a painful price in the form of 2 angels of sacred light. But in the following years, the Prince of Xiong, the Mount Li Sword Sect Master, and Mao Chuyu had all broken into the divine. Last autumn, Taoist Nun Huairun of South Stream Temple had encountered a torrential rain while traveling the Eastern Sea and broken through. Together with the recovered Chao Yunping, the human race had already returned to its golden age in terms of the number of experts of the divine domain. If another expert of the divine domain appeared, how could the demons endure it? Based on Black Robe's calculations, this newly ascended expert of the human race was currently in the snowy region of the demon race, his identity unknown. Thus, the young demon lord had personally gone to the land of extreme cold across the abyss and earnestly requested the 3 ancient experts that had secluded themselves for many years to come forward and lay down this trap. They would kill Xiao Zhang before he broke through, and then they would kill the human expert that would come to receive him. In Black Robe's plan, the names of the latter were clearly written. They were Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong. To be continued. Chapter 84. The update came a little late, but this chapter has 6,000 characters. Yes, I didn't read wrong, 6,000. Don't ask me why. As a person, being happy is the most important thing. We don't like Black Robe, not because he stole the limelight from our dead comrade, but because in the human novels we read when we were young and the plays of Shualao City, the faces of the traitors were all very ugly, and he was the most shameless traitor in the last 1,000 years. But I have to acknowledge his abilities and praise his arrangements this time. Mountain Man Yinji's voice echoed through the desolate plains. Killing Xiao Zhang is not enough to change the course of the world, but if the Pope and Holy Maiden of the human race are also killed, the history of the future might be very different. In the end, there had still been some problems. They had not expected that under the terrifying pressure they had placed on him, Xiao Zhang would break through ahead of time. Although he had just broken through and his grasp of the laws of the world was still not very proficient, it was enough for him to fight his way out of the encirclement despite his heavy injuries. At least he was still alive. But Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong had still come. This was good, extremely good. The plains were extremely quiet in the darkness, the starlight exuding a cold and gloomy aura. The earth monkey poked its head out from behind Chun Changsheng and bared its white fangs at the massive black figure in the distance. It wanted to intimidate its foe, but it didn't even dare to whimper. It was clearly quite frightened by its foe's pressure. Su Yurong asked, "How can you be sure that it will be us?" Xiao Zhang is a madman. He won't trust anyone, much less the great Zhou imperial court. He only trusts Chun Changsheng. Mountain Man Yinji added, "And if Chun Changsheng comes, you will assuredly appear." Chun Changsheng would not be permitted to place himself in any possible danger, because he was the Pope of the human race. As his position as Pope became more and more stable, the power of this law grew stronger and stronger. If he truly wanted to break through this shackle, a believer like Ahua really might try to persuade him with their lives. How could Linghai Zhuang and the others allow him to leave White Emperor City alone? There is only one situation that could obtain the approval of all the priests and believers. He and Su Yurong were traveling together. The entire continent knew that the combined sword style of the Pope and Holy Maiden possessed unimaginable power. Even if they encountered an expert of the divine domain, they would not need to worry about their safety. At present, Mao Qiuyu was overseeing Mount Han, while the Prince of Xiang and the Prince of Zhongshan were at Blue Pass and Snow Old Pass, ready to leave. The demon commander was personally leading the army to prepare for war. The majority of Shualao City's divine domain experts were currently on the front lines. Logically speaking, Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong should not have encountered any danger when they secretly escorted Xiao Zhang back to the Central Plains. However, whether it was Mount Han, Blue Pass, Snow Old Pass, or the heaven-connecting tent on the snowy plains, they were all fake. Intentionally or unintentionally, knowingly or unknowingly, the human race and the demon race were both acting. This secluded and quiet grassland was the true battlefield. The demons invited the 8 great mountain men. This was something that no one had expected. Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong didn't expect this either. Although there were only 3 of them, it was already a terrifying force that they could not contend against. Why can't it be Wang Pe? This was Su Yurong's last question. Wang Pe was Xiao Zhang's lifelong rival. Or perhaps it could be said that he was a formidable foe who had suppressed Xiao Zhang's entire life. Xiao Zhang did not like Wang Pe and was constantly thinking about defeating him. But the person he trusted the most was probably Wang Pe, even more than Qin Changsheng. Just like Sun Mei. Before he died, the person he wanted to see the most besides Mao Qiuyu was Wang Pe. In the age when the wildflowers had just begun to bloom, Wang Pe had been their goal. Had he not been their confidence and boldness? Moreover, Wang Pe was an expert of the divine domain, his path of the blade already complete. If Xiao Zhang wanted to request reinforcements, he was unquestionably the most suitable candidate. The one to answer Su Yurong's question was not Mountain Man Yinji, but Chun Changsheng. It's naturally good for Wang Pe to see you break through, but it's not good for him to see you being chased around in such a sorry state. Chun Changsheng added, "This is very shameful." Su Yurong did not really understand the senseless pride of men, so she was confused. But after hearing Chun Changsheng's explanation, she understood. But she still found it impossible to accept the behavior of men who would rather lose face than lose their lives. Whether it was the breeze or breathing, it rustled the blood-stained white paper. Xiao Zhang was still unconscious, so it was hard to say if he had heard Chun Changsheng's words or understood Su Yurong's meaning. The ground began to shake. The nearby monster horde, no longer caring about the earth monkey's ferocity, scattered in fear. It didn't take long before several screams could be heard in the darkness, followed by the faint stench of blood. The stench of blood was mixed with other fishy odors. Chun Changsheng's mood became rather bad when he smelled this stench. It wasn't because he had a slight obsession with cleanliness, but because he had smelled this stench before. On the battlefield of the snowy plains, the clopping of hooves caused the ground of the grassland to tremble. The stench of blood and rot grew thicker and thicker until it almost lifted the darkness. Several hundred demon wolf cavalry appeared on the grassland, surrounding Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong in the center. These bloodthirsty wolves were around 1 zhang tall, and with the demon cavalry on their backs, they seemed even taller. The wolves opened their bloody mouths, exhaling hot and stinking breaths. Their bristles, like steel needles, were extremely clear in the starlight. The faces of the demon cavalry were also clearly illuminated. Saliva dripped from their mouths, creating an extremely foul stench. The wolf cavalry were the elite cavalry of the demon race. In a one-on-one battle, they could directly contend against and even defeat the black-armored cavalry of the Great Zhou dynasty. Just how terrifying of a charge and killing power would several hundred wolf cavalry be when they gathered together? But in tonight's battle, these wolf cavalry that had traveled several thousand li for a raid simply had no right to serve as the main force. The fate of the divine race might be decided tonight, so I will be extremely cautious. I have also been very cautious in the last few days, so I'm confident that he did not inform anyone else, and I'm also confident that the 2 of you came in such a hurry that there was no time to inform anyone else. I think that I will have more time, so I will be very serious and careful in my attacks, ensuring that I can kill all of you." Mountain Man Yinji said to Chen Changsheng and Su Yorong. In the darkness, his eyes shone like torches, brimming with wisdom and calmness that could see through the laws of the world, but they also signified callousness and terror. Logically speaking, there was no need for this conversation to take place. Mountain Man Yinji did not need to explain, and Chen Changsheng did not need a reason to be ambushed by the demons, but they had still asked and answered. Chen Changsheng wanted to buy time, and Mountain Man Yinji needed time to perfect the trap. The ground trembled as that massive black silhouette began to move toward the south. Although it was very slow, it exuded a terrifying pressure. Mountain Man Yinji's attitude was very clear. Tonight, he wanted stability and no openings. As he gazed at that black mountain in the darkness, Chen Changsheng quietly asked, "What are the chances of success?" He was asking about the chances of leaving alive, so he naturally had to take Xiao Zhang with him. Su Yorong and the White Crane were as fast as lightning, peerless in the world. If they used their full strength, the 8 great mountain men, no matter how unfathomable their cultivation, might not be able to catch up. A breeze ruffled her sleeves as Su Yorong put the faded star plate back into her sleeve. One could vaguely make out the orbits of the stars moving. She did not answer Chen Changsheng's question, only shook her head. It was obvious that the faded star plate's calculations had produced a terrible result. Leaving had no chance of success. Black Robe had calculated that Chen Changsheng and Su Yorong would come to receive Xiao Zhang, so he had naturally made the appropriate arrangements. On the southern plains, mountain men Jinghua and Ichuan were like 2 mountain ranges, rising and falling for several dozen li, blocking off all paths of escape. If Zhiji were here, their chances of leaving tonight might have been a little higher. Chen Changsheng thought about the black-clothed girl who was probably basking in the sun on a warm island. He felt no regret, only a little disappointment. Then what should we do next? He asked Su Yorong. This was trust. In terms of calculation and scheming, there had never been anyone in the world who was better than her. Su Yorong turned to the earth monkey and gave it a few numbers representing distance and direction. She knew that it could understand her words and her meaning. It was obvious that the earth monkey truly did understand. Its body stiffened as if it was afraid. Many years ago, when the incident in the Garden of Zhou occurred, it had seen Su Yorong and knew of her relationship with Chen Changsheng. Thus, it very cleverly chose not to look at Chen Changsheng, much less plead for mercy. Instead, it burrowed into the ground. It didn't take long for it to burrow back out. Its brown and tattered fur was covered in mud and grass, and a wound had appeared on its brow, from which blood constantly flowed. It was in a very sorry state. Chen Changsheng crushed a pill and applied it to the wound. This pill was a leftover material from the cinnabar pill. It did not have much of a mystical effect, but it was very effective at staunching bleeding. The earth monkey licked the blood from its mouth and glanced at Su Yorong, its eyes cold and sinister, tinged with a hint of hatred. It could burrow into the earth, but how could it hide from the spiritual sense of an expert like Mountain Man Yinji? At the foot of a hill more than 10 miles away, it was affected by a terrifying pressure and suffered serious injuries. In its view, Su Yorong had forced it, so it naturally bore a grudge. Chen Changsheng was treating its wounds, so he did not see the change in its expression. Su Yorong did, but she did not care. "How is it?" The earth monkey softly called out, using its 2 short and thin forearms to gesture something. Su Yorong intently watched, silently calculating in her mind. After a few moments, she turned to Chen Changsheng and said, "That won't do either." Chen Changsheng stood up and gazed at the black mountain, his right hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Then we can only fight." The 8 great mountain men were the ancient demon experts who had fought with Wang Jitse, Qin Zhong, and Yugong several hundred years ago outside Shuilao City. If he and Su Yorong fought them head-on, they would undoubtedly lose. The massive black silhouette slowly moved, an unimaginably heavy pressure crushing down on Chen Changsheng and Su Yorong. The grassland in the darkness became incomparably terrifying. The good news is that we only need to fight one. Su Yurong said, immovable as a mountain. The 8 great mountain men truly had unfathomable cultivations, like demon gods. When they were motionless, they could even be described as perfect and invulnerable. But when they moved, they could no longer maintain their perfect state, and a few openings would appear. They were like true mountains beneath the starry sky. When they were connected to the earth, they were unshakable, but when they moved, their foundations would become unstable. In tonight's ambush, mountain men Jinghua and Ichuan had cut off Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong's path of retreat, so they could not move. Mountain man Yinji and the several hundred wolf cavalry were the main force of the attack. In truth, as mountain man Yinji slowly approached in the darkness, he also found it impossible to maintain his imposing posture. Su Yurong had used the calculations of her fated star plate and the earth monkey to take the risk of burrowing into the ground to find a path that could successfully leave. But she did not choose to leave through this path, not even telling Qin Changsheng. It was not because of the bloody and terrifying wolf cavalry around the grassland, nor was it because of the tinsome vicious birds illuminated by the Southern Cross constellation in the northern sky. It was because she sensed a tinge of danger in the depths of the darkness. This made her somewhat suspect that this path was a trap laid down by Blackrobe. Mountain man Yinji stopped. Although no one could clearly see how he moved, and no one could see his feet, it was impossible for anyone to see him. At this time, he was still 10 li from the grassland where Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong were. To an ordinary person, 10 li was an extremely long distance. One would find it very difficult to clearly see what was going on, much less attack. However, it was right here, at a distance of 10 li, something that defied logic, and logic was completely unimaginable. Mountain man Yinji attacked Qin Changsheng and Su Yurong. He raised his right hand. The vast sky of stars instantly dimmed, because a black silhouette 10-some li long had suddenly appeared in the night sky, obscuring several hundred stars. This black silhouette slammed down from the starry sky toward the grassland. Thunderous booms resounded through the sky. This was the sound of air that could not escape in time being compressed and then torn apart by a massive power. Qin Changsheng even felt like he could hear a large part of the darkness being forcibly torn apart. Su Yurong attacked. She attacked with her most powerful sword of great light. Countless sword slashes carrying countless flames illuminated the desolate grassland. The black silhouette in the sky became even clearer, even more real. Soon after, Chun Changsheng attacked. He used the blazing sword of the 3 moves of the wasteland. Yes, after so many years, the 3 sword styles that Su Li had transmitted to him in the wasteland now had official names in the Taoist canon. Scorching and invisible flames converged into the light. The sword intents of the stainless sword and the temple sword clashed and fused. The 2 sword rainbows rose together, instantly giving off an endless feeling of harmony, as if they were so perfect that they did not belong to the mortal world. The 2 sword intents clashed. The 2 sword styles fused. The 2 sword glows fused. This was the unity sword art of South Stream Temple. This was the sword style that Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong had used to shock the world. A ball of light appeared in the darkness of the grassland. This ball of light was formed from the purest sword glows. It was blazing and dazzling like a sun that had never set. The black silhouette 10-some li long descended from the sky and accurately landed on this ball of light. A loud bang resounded. The grass in a radius of several dozen zhang was uprooted, black dirt flying in every direction like arrows. The barrier of light formed from sword glows rose several zhang above Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong, blocking the black silhouette, exuding a terrifying pressure. The barrier of light constantly creaked, like a wooden door that had not been repaired for many years, or like a stool that could not bear a heavy load, ready to shatter at any moment. The earth monkey lay behind Chun Changsheng, using its thin forelimbs to cover its eyes. Its entire body trembled in fear, blood flowing from its fingers. Just a moment ago, it had wanted to burrow into the ground and leave, but it had not expected that the earth would be crushed by mountain man Yinji's pressure and the sword intense filling the sky and become as hard as steel, causing its head to bleed. Howls brimming with ruthlessness and cruelty resounded through the darkness. Several hundred wolf cavalry madly charged at Chun Changsheng and Suyurong. The mountains that stretched for several hundred li on the grassland to the south were incomparably majestic and difficult to cross. Mountain men Jingbua and Ichuan had cut off their path of retreat. From a distance of 10 some li, Mountain man Yinji had launched a majestic attack. Chun Changsheng and Suyurong had only barely managed to block it with their combined swords. Now that the wolf cavalry were charging, what should they do? At this moment, the earth monkey sneaked a glance at Chun Changsheng. Its eyes were somewhat sad. It believed that it had guessed how Chun Changsheng would deal with the wolf cavalry. Chun Changsheng would probably summon those monsters from the Garden of Zhou. No matter how terrifying those several hundred wolf cavalry were, they were no match for so many monsters in the plains of the unsetting sun. And this wasn't even considering the fact that the earth monkey's two powerful companions, the mountain-toppling fiend, were amongst those monsters. But even if they killed these wolf cavalry and 3 ancient demon experts, in the end, how many of the monsters in the Garden of Zhou would be able to survive? The earth monkey felt rather uncomfortable when it thought of this conclusion. But it asked itself if it were in Chun Changsheng's shoes, it would have made the same choice. So it had no opinion of Chun Changsheng, much less any resentment. It was just a little sad. Suyurong also knew that there were still many monsters in the Garden of Zhou. As long as Chun Changsheng summoned them, he could resolve the danger posed by the wolf cavalry. But she didn't look at Chun Changsheng, no matter if she looked at him secretly or openly, because she was not that sentimental earth monkey. She and Chun Changsheng were truly connected, and she knew that Chun Changsheng would not do such a thing. In other words, she knew what Chun Changsheng planned to do. She took a step forward and stood in front of Chun Changsheng. 2 pure white wings unfurled behind her. Golden phoenix flames began to burn, and the temple sword in her hand began to radiate even more light. In a very short period of time, she chose to take over part of the pressure from Chun Changsheng's short sword. Chun Changsheng sat cross-legged on the ground and closed his eyes. Swoosh, 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 like a rainstorm breaking through the sky, like arrows breaking through the clouds. Countless swords flew out of the sheath of the vault sheath, and the sword light illuminated the grassland under the night sky. The 3,000 swords covered the world, forming the South Stream Temple Sword Array. At this moment, the starlight in the sky seemed so dim. As the awe-inspiring sword intent descended, the wolf cavalry at the very front instantly disintegrated into several dozen lumps of flesh and blood. Soon after, the forelimbs of another giant wolf were severed and it crashed to the ground. To the northwest, the horns and armor of a demon cavalryman had been neatly severed, revealing his brain. In the starlight, it sparkled like the smallest lake in the world. The sound of heavy objects falling to the ground kept ringing out, and screams kept ringing out. Blood of indistinguishable color sprayed out. The charge of the wolf cavalry was extremely fast, so they fell even faster. In a few seconds, 30-some wolf cavalry had died to the South Stream Temple Sword Array, while 10-some more were heavily injured and powerless to continue fighting. A military order rang out in the darkness. Mountain man Yinji's deep voice came from 10 li away. The wolf cavalry stopped their charge. They circled around Chun Changsheng and Suyurong and retreated into the darkness, only stopping when they were several hundred zhang away. There was a light thump. A thin sword silently appeared in the night sky and cut through the throat of a demon cavalryman. The starlight was brighter than before. The sight of green blood seeping out of the gaps between the hairy fingers was truly nauseating. The wolf cavalry panicked and retreated even farther away. Only after several li, and confirming that they were out of the range of the sword array, did they stop. Many of the demon cavalrymen showed fear in their eyes. They had seen many experts, but they had never seen such a method of fighting. The South Stream Temple Sword Array could be said to be the most perfect defensive method on the battlefield, and also the most effective method for attacking a large group. But in the past, several hundred South Stream Temple disciples have been needed to form the Sword Array, making it very easy for the demon experts to ambush and break the array. Right now, Chun Changxing alone could use the South Stream Temple Sword Array, so how could he stand in the rain of swords that filled the sky be broken? To put another way, no one was more suited than Chun Changsheng to kill enemies on the battlefield, even if they were stronger. Was the young pope of the human race this terrifying? The several hundred wolf cavalry howled, because of fear, because of anger, because of unwillingness. The demon cavalry and the giant wolves wanted to use this method to express their desire for vengeance. They stopped several li away, ready to charge at any moment. At this distance, no matter how powerful Chun Changsheng's spiritual sense was, he could not control his sword to attack. They only needed to put enough pressure on the enemy, and then wait for Mountain Man Yenji to break their defenses. After Chun Changsheng formed the South Stream Temple Sword Array, Su Yurong alone had to endure Mountain Man Yenji's attacks. Even though she had immediately ignited her phoenix flames, she could not last for too long. Chun Changsheng's sword array needed to guard against another charge from the wolf cavalry. So how long could she last? Could it be that he could hold on forever? The current situation seemed to indicate that Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong would be suppressed by Mountain Man Yenji and then bitten to death by the wolf cavalry. At least in the view of the demon cavalry, this was already a foregone conclusion. They looked over, thinking about how they would kill the Pope and Holy Maiden of the human race, and then tear them to shreds and eat them alive. Their eyes grew more and more savage, their breathing heavier and heavier. Su Yurong's face paled, and she seemed on the verge of collapse. At such a crucial moment, she suddenly made a very unexpected move. The light in the sky suddenly vanished. She had put away the temple sword. Then who would block Mountain Man Yenji's pressure? The South Stream Temple Sword Array in the night sky suddenly moved, turning in an extremely orderly fashion. Those densely packed swords had originally been aimed at the grassland, but now they were all aimed at the sky. It was still the rain of swords, but they were preparing to descend upon the sky. 3,000 swords were aimed at the black silhouette in the sky. The starlight and sword glows reflected off each other, making the night sky even brighter. The black silhouette Tensum Lilong finally revealed its true appearance. To be continued. Chapter 85. The black shadow could be said to be a mountain range, but it could also be said to be the arm of a demon god. At the very front of the mountain range, in the sky above Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong, there were 5 mountain peaks that looked like 5 fingers. The rain of swords fell on the mountain peak, causing smoke and dust to rise, and the sound of cracking could be heard continuously. The speed at which the mountain was sinking became slower and slower until it finally stopped. During the entire process, Su Yurong didn't look at the night sky, as if she didn't care about it. Of course, it could also be understood as her trust in Chun Changsheng. She thrust the temple sword into the grass beside her. With a light sound, the green grass began to emit green smoke, but it wasn't scorched. Its posture became even more upright, appearing full of vitality. She untied a longbow made of paulownia wood from her back. A bow made of tong wood was the tong bow of the tier of legendary weapons. Only Nank, Chun Changsheng, Qiu Shanjun, Gohan Shi, and a few others knew that Su Yurong's strongest technique was not sword arts. The temple sword had been found by Chun Changsheng in the Garden of Zhou and then returned to Holy Maiden Peak. The Sword of Great Light had only been mastered after she had obtained the temple sword. As for the tong bow, it had always been on her back since she was a child. Normally, no one would be able to see this longbow. He would only appear when she needed him. For example, at this moment, Su Yurong took out an arrow and knocked it on the string. These were the Wu arrows. Her expression was calm as she raised her bow. His movements were steady and smooth, with the feeling of floating clouds and flowing water. At the same time, it was like the superimposition of a dozen or so images, extremely clear. The bowstring was pulled, and it gradually looked like the moon that the demons in the north worshipped. Her eyelashes did not blink. The wind picked up. His white ceremonial robes fluttered. His black hair also floated up parallel to the arrow. Her delicate fingers left the strings. The tong bow began to play. It was said that Polonia wood was the best material for a zither. No wonder it sounded so beautiful. The sound of the strings echoed in the grassland. The arrow came before the sound. Several miles away, a bloody hole appeared between the eyebrows of a demon cavalryman. The bloody hole was very round, and its edges were very smooth. It even made people want to use the word delicate to describe it. Then Su-Yurong drew the bow a second time, a third time, a fourth time. Her movements were always steady, and there was a kind of concise beauty to them. In a very short time, the quiver was empty. 30 Wu arrows left the string of the tong bow and flew into the darkness, heading straight for the wolf cavalry, several li away. Muffled groans could be heard continuously. Blood splattered everywhere. The demon cavalry continued to fall. Cries of fear rang out incessantly. The wolf cavalry scattered in all directions. 30 arrows could only cause 30 deaths at most. Logically speaking, spreading out was the best choice. Su-Yurong once more raised the tong bow, though there were no arrows left. This time, it was obvious that she took a lot longer than before. Finally, she released the bowstring. The bowstring was stained with a bit of blood. It met the night wind, rubbed against it, and began to burn, producing a golden flame. The arrows that had pierced through the skulls of the demon cavalry. The arrows that pierced through the giant wolf's body. Those Wu arrows that had brought death and then vanished into the night had suddenly returned. 30 Wu arrows trailed fiery tails as they chased after the wolf cavalry scattered across the plains. They were like blazing birds of fire, but also like dazzling shooting stars. Many years ago in the Garden of Zhou, at the end of Sunset Valley, Nank had experienced a similar attack. After that night, this was the first time Su-Yurong had used such a method. How could the wolf cavalry avoid it? Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The plains constantly resounded with the sounds of Wu arrows piercing through solid objects. The Wu arrows, trailing fiery tails, chased after the wolf cavalry, driving away the darkness. Wherever they went, death followed. After an unknown amount of time, the voices finally stopped. The dark plains regained their peace. But it was more accurate to call it a deathly stillness, because the plains had already become a graveyard. Corpses lay strewn across an area of several li in circumference. Whether it was the demon cavalry or the giant wolves, they had all died. No one had been spared. The plains reflected the starlight, giving off a rather damp feeling. It was not an empty mountain, but like a fresh rain. This was not a drizzle, but blood. Su-Yurong thrust the tong bow into the ground. The tong bow was very long, standing even taller than her. It really did look like a harp. In reality, it was not a harp, but a tree. In an instant, countless branches sprouted from the tong bow, bearing countless green leaves that gently swayed in the night wind. A fresh and clean air fell like a waterfall over her and Chun Chong Sheng, and it also fell on the earth monkey. The earth monkey was peeking at her. It was shocked, and then it felt its injuries heal with unimaginable speed. The green branches continued to grow, quickly growing into a large tree. This was a wudong tree. This wudong tree contained the Tong Palace array. She unsheathed the temple sword and walked to Chun Chongsheng's side, gazing up at the mountain in the night sky. The wudong tree can last 80 seconds. Think of some other method. Her temples were slightly damp and her expression was somewhat tired, but her eyes were still calm as if nothing had happened. A solitary wudong tree suddenly appeared on the dark plains. The branches of the tree extended through the thousands of swords, blocking the mountain in the night sky. When the tong bow and wu arrows were combined, they formed the wudong tree. The previous holy maiden of South Stream Temple had used her unimaginable wisdom and ability to embed the Tong Palace array into the bow and arrow, further increasing its power. Only a divine artifact like this could block the attacks of a legendary figure like Mountain Man Yenji. Of course, not even this wudong tree could last forever. Countless peals of thunder resounded over the plains. This was the sound of the heavy mountain pushing against the ground, the sound of rock and earth pressing against each other. Mountain Man Yinji walked toward them. His speed was very slow, but there were no openings. He was like a moving mountain range, exerting an unimaginable pressure on them. There was also a mountain in the night sky, exuding an ancient and time-worn chi. It was so heavy that it made one's heart palpitate. The wutong tree rustled, hundreds of green leaves falling. The trunk gradually bent, creaking as if it might snap at any moment. The several thousand swords continued to slash at the mountain. Occasionally, bits of stone would fall to the ground and then dissipate into green light in the air. Chen Chongqing's eyelashes trembled as he lowered his head to the ground, seemingly thinking of something. Su Yurong had told him to think of something. If he could not think of something, they might have to take a risk. Chen Chongqing had a personality that disliked taking risks, but if he kept staring at the ground, what could he think of? It wasn't like he could see a flower on the ground. In truth, Chen Chongqing really was looking at a flower. Xiao Zhang was lying on the ground, unconscious. The white paper on his face fluttered in the wind, the specks of blood constantly shifting, making it look like wintersweet in the wind. There were 2 holes in the white paper where his eyes should have been. The nose and mouth had been drawn with a brush. This was where painted armor, Xiao Zhang's name, had come from. Why did Xiao Zhang cover his face with a white paper? This was a question that everyone was curious about. Some people said that he had a birthmark on his face and was extremely ugly. Some people said that he was extremely beautiful and that when he was young, he was often mistaken for a woman, and that he would often encounter other kinds of trouble, so he covered his face. The most famous and acknowledged theory was that in order to surpass Wang Pe, Xiao Zhang had forcefully cultivated some evil technique. In the end, he suffered a cultivation defect and was heavily injured, his face almost disfigured. As a result, he used a white paper to cover his face. It was said that the Elder of Heavenly Secrets had once asked him why he did not use a mask or a bamboo hat. Xiao Zhang said that he used a white paper to cover his face because he did not want to scare children, and it was not because he was ashamed to meet people. So why did he need to use a mask? As for the bamboo hat, it was even more depressing. Based on Chen Chongqing's understanding of Xiao Zhang, the conversation between the Elder of Heavenly Secrets and Xiao Zhang in this story was probably fake. It was said that Xiao Zhang had only said it casually, so this story itself might not be true. Xiao Zhang's face did not have that terrifying wound. Then, just what was underneath the white paper? Many people wanted to take off this white paper and take a look, but very few people dared to do so, and those people were already dead. At this time, Xiao Zhang was unconscious. It could be said that this was the best opportunity to see his true appearance. This truly was a great temptation. Chen Chongqing also seemed unable to endure it. He stretched out his hand, preparing to take off the white paper. But with the powerful demons before him, their pressure as heavy as a mountain, and the situation so dangerous, how could he still have the mood to think about these things? I don't understand the Bao at all, but I especially like it because I think it's very beautiful. That's why in the Qingyu years, there's Yin Xiaoyi. In the Jinka, there's young Master Shi who plays with a big sniper, and there's no need to even mention Jiangyi. Ninkei's iron bow is the weapon I've written the most seriously about in my life. When I came to choosing heaven, my favorite was Su Yurong using the bow and arrow. Although I didn't use it much, I got excited every time I wrote about it. When I wrote about her battle with Nank, I told everyone that Yurong is my Kikyo. I love her. Thank you. In the last chapter, I corrected a few typos and changed a few sentences. As for the difference between wintersweet and plum blossoms, some readers have reminded me, but I really don't understand. In any case, this is a different world, so let me paint the colors. Heh. To be continued. Chapter 86. Chen Chongqing's hand got closer and closer to Xiao Zhang's face, until it touched the edge of the white paper. Perhaps because it was wet with sweat or stained with too much blood, the edge of the white paper was not sharp. It was like a piece of puff pastry that had been left on the Tong River for 3 days. The moment his finger touched the white paper, the 2 black holes on it suddenly lit up. Xiao Zhang had opened his eyes. He had woken up. Of course, It was also possible that he had not fainted at all. Chen Changsheng showed no surprise, probably because he already knew. He asked, "Have you rested enough?" Su Yurong did not turn around. She calmly gazed at the mountain in the sky. The South Stream Temple Sword Array was already being pushed closer and closer to the ground by that mountainous chi. More and more leaves fell from the Wudong tree, and the tree creaked louder and louder. There were even places where the bark had cracked, revealing white. Xiao Zhang looked at Chen Changsheng and said, "No one has ever dared to tear off this paper. Not in the past, and certainly not now." His voice was very cold, emotionless, and senseless, just like his eyes. In the past, he was an expert on the proclamation of liberation, and coupled with his crazed and murderous reputation, no one was willing to provoke him. Now that he had successfully entered the divine domain, even fewer people dared to provoke him. Chen Changsheng did not care about these threatening words. "If you're not willing to wake up, I can only tear off this paper." Xiao Zhang replied, "I'm a little sleepy. Can't the two of you hold on a little longer?" Truly useless. Only a madman like him would dare to speak to the Pope and Holy Maiden in such a tone. Chen Changsheng still did not care. "Even if we take turns holding on, there will always be a moment when we can't hold on." Xiao Zhang understood the meaning of these words and froze. Chen Changsheng and Su Yurong had actually decided to stop stalling and prepare to fight. Where did their confidence come from? Since it's a fight, we naturally have to fight. Chen Changsheng smiled at him. "Perhaps we'll win, perhaps we'll lose. Who knows?" His smile was still as clean, pure, and warm as it had been in his youth. But in Xiao Zhang's view, it was rather frightening. How could they so casually decide to fight for such an important matter? Both the Tong Palace and the South Stream Temple Sword Array could still hold Mountain Man Yinji for a few moments. He was heavily injured, but he was, after all, a newly ascended saint. In this situation, Chen Changsheng and Su Yurong decided not to wait any longer. They were going to kill Mountain Man Yinji. Did they not understand that as an ancient expert of the demon race, Mountain Man Yinji was much stronger than those demon generals, perhaps even on par with the demon commander? Did they not understand that if the human race's Pope, Holy Maiden, and him, a newly ascended expert of the divine domain, were to all die in battle tonight, history might truly change? They could have waited a little longer, so why did they have to fight? Why was Chen Changsheng still smiling at such a time? And his smile was still as clean as before. Su Yurong was still in the mood to watch the stars with her hands behind her back. Everyone said that Xiao Zhang was a madman, but he found that Chen Changsheng and Su Yurong were even crazier than him. What are the answers to these questions? He suddenly remembered something. This was drive. The drive of a young man. He was a few decades older than Chen Changsheng and Su Yurong, but for cultivators, he was still considered young. His eyes became sharp, like a silver spear that had been washed by autumn water, full of coldness. How much longer? He walked to Su Yurong's side and asked. Su Yurong replied, 47 breaths. Xiao Zhang's raspy voice once more emerged from the white paper. I'm going to break his mountain range. Carrying his spear, he began to walk into the darkness of the north. He didn't even look at the mountain range in the night sky above him. The true mountain was several li away, in the place he was preparing to go. A few days ago, he sensed the signs of a breakthrough and immediately ended his life as an assassin on the snowy plains, following the route he had agreed upon all those years ago to return to the south. Just when he was about to pass through the plains and return to the territory of the human race, he saw 3 mountains suddenly rising up in the wilderness. Mountain Man Yinji, the 3 mountain men of Jingpa, and Mountain Man Ichuan. In the face of these terrifying experts from ancient times, it was simply impossible for him to escape. Logically speaking, his death was assured, but he had not expected this unprecedented pressure to allow him to cross that threshold and break into the divine realm ahead of time. He had narrowly escaped, but he had still suffered severe injuries. When he rode his kite into the mountains and saw Chen Changsheng and Su Yurong, his mind instantly relaxed. His injuries and mental exhaustion exploded at the same time, causing him to fall unconscious. After resting for a while, his injuries had not healed, but his mind was much more refreshed. Most important of all was the appearance of Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong. The two saints of the highest status in the human race had come to take him back. This was a matter worthy of pride. Even someone as proud as him believed this to be the case. For this, he was willing to fight another battle. But he had said that he would break his mountain range, not that he would break his mountain range. He was not confident that he could break Mountain Man Yinji's defenses, not even confident that he could survive. The rustling of the white paper in the bleak wind seemed rather inauspicious. But his figure was not desolate, because the spear was straight, its red tassels dancing in the wind. Because his fighting spirit soared to the heavens. Su Yurong drew back her gaze to the darkness severally away. There's only one chance. Chun Changsheng understood what she meant. Xiao Zhang had forcefully suppressed his injuries and could only use his strongest attack. Even if he still had the strength to fight afterward, it would be impossible for him to be stronger than this. To put another way, if they wanted to directly break through and defeat Mountain Man Yinji, this was their only chance. The wind on his face was rather chilly, not like a knife, but more like the water in the stream in Xining Village at the beginning of spring. Chun Changsheng clenched his left hand into a fist, the stone pearl of the heavenly tome monoliths falling from his sleeve to his wrist. The weight of the stone pearl caused his mood to turn heavy. Only after taking in a deep breath did he calm down. In the darkness, Mountain Man Yinji truly did seem like a mountain. It was not that distant mountain range, but an even more realistic mountain. This mountain was not particularly large, but it seemed to be one with the rocks deep in the earth, giving off an immovable feeling. Xiao Zhang walked up to the mountain and stopped. The starlight fell on his face, reflected off the white paper, making it seem even whiter, somewhat like the moonlight behind Xiulao City. Strangely enough, the red tassels of the spear danced, causing the starlight to wander. The starlight seemed to become a real existence, wisps and threads. The world was relative. Nothingness could become real, but what of the real? In the starlight, Xiao Zhang's figure flickered in and out of existence as if he could vanish at any moment. If one only used the naked eye to observe, it would be impossible to determine his position. This was the manifestation of the Tao that came from understanding the laws of the world. Tonight, he had just broken into the saint level, so his understanding of the laws of the world was still lacking, far from mastery. But now, he had clearly made great progress. This was the ability of an expert of the divine domain. Whether it was in battle or in slumber, they could gain a deeper understanding of the world. Two balls of flame were high up on the black mountain, cold and gloomy. A low and indifferent voice rose from the mountain. In the last several hundred years, in terms of fighting intent, you could be ranked in the top 3. Mountain Man Yinji seemed to know that Xiao Zhang still had the strength to fight, but he did not care. Even if there was still Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong, he did not care. He appeared very indifferent, even in the mood to evaluate his opponent. In his experience, this sort of evaluation was an extremely high praise. Xiao Zhang did not appreciate it, saying, "You monster, you're rather talkative." The demon race had always called themselves the divine race, but they were not angry at being called demons. This was the principle behind the saying that demon and God were one. But they deeply disliked being called monsters, perhaps because it made them think of the demi-human race. And in the long river of history, the demi-human race had spent the majority of their time playing the role of slaves to the demon race. Mountain Man Yinji's eyes turned even colder. Xiao Zhang sneered, "What? You're covered in stone from head to toe, so of course you're a monster. Are you still not convinced?" Mountain Man Yinji replied, "I am a mountain man." Xiao Zhang laughed. "Ha ha ha! What mountain man? It's just an old black mountain demon." His hoarse laughter echoed through the grassland. The laughter suddenly stopped. Xiao Zhang thrust his spear forward. The starlight shone on the grassland like a clear and shallow stream. As the spear thrust forward, the starlight suddenly began to move, transforming into a bolt of cloth. The spear fell into the mountain, and the starlight followed, exploding into countless silver shards. It was an extremely beautiful sight, like fireworks, but also like the blooming of a real flower. Several li away, a silver flower suddenly bloomed in the darkness. Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong knew that this was the clash between the spear and the cliff. Soon after, a yellow dragon roared out of the grassland, a faint smear of red flickering in and out of existence. Two powerful chis stirred up all the sand in a radius of several li. The starlight instantly dimmed, making it difficult to see. Mountain Man Yinji's cultivation truly was unfathomable. While dealing with that terrifying spear, he had not forgotten to continue suppressing Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong. The mountain in the night sky suddenly pressed down, its five-finger-like peaks slamming into the south stream temple sword array. Grating and unpleasant sounds of friction rang out. Countless rocks were cut apart by the swords and rustled to the ground, dispersing into streaks of light in the air. The palm-like mountain got even closer to the ground. The wudong tree was bent to the extreme, ready to snap at any moment. The green leaves on its branches had almost all fallen off. Su Yurong had long since been prepared. She was as calm as ever as she softly said, "Let's go." In a flash of light, the earth monkey vanished. Chun Changsheng had sent it into the garden of Zhou and then taken her hand. A pair of pure white wings unfurled in the wind, blazing with golden flames. A stream of light illuminated the grassland, two phoenix flames piercing through the darkness. A hole appeared in the gale, formed by the sand and grass. Su Yurong and Chun Changsheng had arrived in front of Mountain Man Yinji. Two sword glows appeared, dazzling and beautiful, and then they fused together into a dazzling rainbow of swords. The spear appeared once more, arrogantly bringing the rainbow of swords with it as it rumbled toward the mountain, a domineering flower blooming in the night sky. With a massive boom, the earth quaked. Countless rocks flew into the air, tearing through the darkness like arrows. In a radius of several dozen li, countless beasts were crushed to death. As the dust settled, Mountain Man Yinji's figure gradually appeared. There were two extremely deep sword marks in the middle of the mountain. Looking at them, they seemed to be about a foot deep. These two sword slashes crisscrossed, appearing just like the Southern Cross that the demon dukes of Shualao City were most familiar with. The places where the sword slashes crisscrossed were deeper than the other places. They were very round and had smooth edges, like holes that had been chiseled out by craftsmen with tools. These were the marks left by the spear. If this mountain was a person, the sword slashes and spear holes would be the person's chest, and a little to the left was where the ethereal palace was. The arrogant spear and the harmonious swords had finally broken through Mountain Man Yinji's defenses. This position was Mountain Man Yinji's only flaw. This was what Su Yurong had calculated. The problem was, did that hole completely pass through the mountain? The surface of the grassland was covered in cracks. The black mud and grass had long ago become indistinguishable from one another. Xiao Zhang lay on the ground, the white paper on his face soaked in blood as he stared at Mountain Man Yinji several dozen zhang away. Chun Changsheng was also heavily injured. He sat cross-legged on the ground, his face pale as he constantly coughed. The hole in the paper was very black. Xiao Zhang's eyes were very deep, and his voice was as hoarse as a broken bell. Damn, this still isn't enough. Chun Changsheng sighed. They had broken through the mountain, but they had not been able to flatten it. Su Yurong stood up and drew her bow once more. Her face was very pale, and as she drew the bow, it became even paler, making it seem like snow. Her black hair brushed past her cheeks, contrasting so vividly that it was hair-raising. A mouthful of blood spurted from her lips. Her white ceremonial robe was covered in specks of blood, looking like shattered flowers. The chi she exuded was even more powerful. Note, the bowstring was noiselessly drawn. A small and delicate arrow pierced through the darkness and noiselessly landed on the mountain. Without the slightest deviation, it shot into the hole. There was a light crack, like something had shattered. Xiao Zhang and Chun Changsheng felt an extreme pain in their chests, because they had heard that sound. It was the sound of their hearts shattering. Su Yurong's face was as white as paper. She swayed, blood trickling from the corner of her lips. Even she herself was injured by that delicate little arrow. Mountain Man Yinji had naturally suffered the greatest injury. A furious roar of pain rose from the cliff. The title was, of course, Winslow. At first, he had been prepared to use the stunning shot and the heartbreaking arrow. From the contents of the chapter, he should still be able to see some traces, but after thinking about it, he felt that with Xiao Zhang's name and personality, it would be a pity not to be arrogant. Moreover, Yurong was not like those stinky men in Kaifeng City. Tonight, her name was Li Shangnian. By the way, she would like to recommend Old Six's WeChat public account. It was updated every day and was not an advertisement. A few days ago, he had written about Jin Shi. It was well written, simple, and clear. As for my WeChat account, are there any students who haven't followed it? It's me. Of course, this is an advertisement, and it's very popular. Finally, this chapter has 4,000 words. Oh, I wish the girls a happy holiday. Let's return to Li Shangnian. Everyone should understand what I mean, right? You still have to be awesome. Really, this is the most important thing. To be continued. Chapter 87. I'm sharing 3 pieces of good news. First, old readers should all know that I'm a Milan fan. Although it's been several years since I've watched football, I'm still very happy to hear this news today. In the future, Istanbul and Rocco will probably be mentioned less often. Second, this chapter is 5,000 words. Haven't I been pleasantly surprised recently? Third, I have a stockpile. Although it's pitifully few, I still think it's very awesome. I don't know how long I can maintain this state, but I'll do my best. Taiyin, birthday card, Mata. The mountain fiercely swayed, countless rocks falling to the ground and stirring up a cloud of dust that obscured Mountain Man Yinji's figure. After an unknown period of time, the smoke and dust gradually settled. The rock mountain had clearly shrunk, but it still stood in the grassland under the night sky and did not collapse. The mountain was still a mountain. Disappointment finally appeared on Su Yurong's face as she gazed at this sight. The Holy Maiden's methods truly are impressive. Mountain Man Yinji's voice was still gloomy, but if one listened carefully, they might be able to hear a hint of trembling and anger hidden within. Xiao Zhang used his spear to push his exhausted body up. The white paper flapped in the wind, the black hole seemingly serene and deep. Again, he spoke in a hoarse voice, seemingly unconcerned by the situation before him. Chen Changxing said nothing. Several li away, the storm of swords was preparing to return. Su Yurong also said nothing, taking out the faded star plate from her sleeve. Starlight fell on the faded star plate, following the paths of the stars that flowed like water, emitting rays of light of varying depths. She had calculated today's conclusion many times, but the results had always been extremely poor. That delicate arrow had also failed to achieve its goal, leaving her rather disappointed. But since the battle was not over, it had to continue. If the faded star plate could not calculate a good conclusion, then if she used it as a weapon to fight, would that result be different? The spear, imbued with the might of the world, rumbled toward the mountain. The two sword glows met once more, cleaving apart the world with a resolve that seemed capable of incinerating the world. The winds howled and the dust rose once more. Through the sandstorm, Su Yurong stared at the black hole in the mountain, her fingers constantly fiddling with the faded star plate. Mountain Man Yinji had suffered significant injuries, so he now sensed danger. Whether it was Xiao Zhang's spear or Su Yurong's faded star plate. What made him most vigilant was the aura of burning the world emitted from Chen Changsheng and Su Yurong's dual swords. This made him think of that extremely terrifying man of the human race many years ago. The wariness and danger, the unbearable memories, had truly enraged Mountain Man Yinji. The night clouds were torn apart by an angry roar and scattered in all directions. The mountain range was like a cluster, the grassland was undulating, and the waves were furious. Mountain Man Yinji's several thousand years of cultivation were unleashed. The spear's radiance faded slightly, and the sword's light suddenly dimmed. Xiao Zhang roared angrily as he struggled to hold on. Chun Chong Sheng stood up and extended his left hand towards the mountain in front. At this moment, Su Yurong suddenly turned to the faded star plate. The paths of the stars on the faded star plate revolved at an unimaginable speed, forming countless complex and extremely difficult to comprehend diagrams. She was a little confused. What exactly happened? To be more precise, what would happen in the next moment that would change the course of this war and even the entire history so much? The night clouds were torn apart and then flowed away. The sky suddenly became clear and the stars were extremely bright. Suddenly, a line of fire appeared high up in the sky. In a very short amount of time, this line of fire had arrived over the grassland. This line of fire had come from the south. Logically speaking, mountain men Jinghua and Ichuan should have been able to stop this line of fire, but for some reason, they had not done so. Perhaps it was because the line of fire did not pose a threat to the two parties fighting on the battlefield. At the end of this line of fire was a red cloud Qilin. The red cloud Qilin flapped its wings, but there was no one on it. Everyone knew that the second-ranked divine general of the Great Zhou, Xue Xingchuan, had used a red cloud Qilin as his mount. Could this be that one? 10 some years ago, Xue Xingchuan had been poisoned to death by Zhou Tong in the imperial palace, and that red cloud Qilin had vanished into the depths of the palace, never to be seen again. Why had it appeared here tonight? Just what did this mean? The grassland was silent. This period of silence was very short. To Mountain Man Yinji, Xiao Zhang, Chun Chongsheng, Su Yurong, and the two mountain men from the south, this period of time seemed very long. It even felt like several years had passed in this silence. The world was relative. Position was relative. Time was also relative. The perceived time was longer than the actual time. Perhaps it was because the new object of reference that had arrived in this fragment of time was moving too quickly. What came was a saber glow. It came from the heavens. This saber glow was not particularly dazzling, but very calm and serene. Compared to the fierce winds and gravel that had yet to disperse, this saber glow could be said to be very exquisite. Compared to Mountain Man Yinji's fury, this saber glow could be said to be very gentle. But this saber glow was truly too fast. If this saber glow had cut through flowing water, the flowing water would have definitely been severed. If this saber glow had cut through the flowing water of time, time would have stopped for a few moments. By the time everyone saw this saber glow, it was already descending. Swish! There was a light sound. The saber glow landed on the cliff. There was no flying gravel, no rising of dust. The saber glow seemed to be buried in the cliff. And then the mountain collapsed. The earth quaked. The mountain range was moving. Two deep howls came from the darkness of the south. These howls were brimming with grief and anger. Chun Chongsheng felt that these howls were rather similar to the language of the dragon race. An even more arduous battle would probably follow. He stood up, preparing to fight. At this moment, a low whistling sound came from the collapsed cliff. It was Mountain Man Yinji's voice. This time, Chun Chongsheng could hear it more clearly. He realized that it was not the standard language of the demon race, nor was it the language of the ancient demon race favored by the nobles of Shuilao City. He turned to Su Yurong. Su Yurong lightly shook her head. Although they could not understand the specific meaning, they could vaguely understand Mountain Man Yinji's current mood and the message he was trying to convey. Mountain Man Yinji was not angry, unresigned, or resentful. He was very calm. The two mountains stopped, let out several low howls, and then began to head west, gradually vanishing into the darkness. The grasslands of the south had regained their peace, though there was now the sorrow of parting. Blood kept dripping down the edge of the paper. Xiao Zhang reached out his hand to wipe it off. It was wet, and he was annoyed. He looked at the person next to him, feeling even more irritated. This is such a good opportunity, so why aren't you chasing it? What are you standing around for? Just who are you hoping to erect a statue for you? Despite being jeered at, the person's expression did not change. He had heard this sort of thing far too many times over the past few decades, and he knew how to counterattack. If you weren't injured, or if you could still walk a few steps, you could give chase. Xiao Zhang had a very nasty complexion, but he could not counterattack because this was a fact. He truly had been injured, his injuries truly were severe, and he truly could not walk. Most importantly, this person had saved him, whether he was willing or not. As the dust settled, the sound of rocks rolling could be heard. A person walked out of the collapsed mountain. This person was dressed in white, his hair and beard all white, and his body was also white. This white was not the white of snow, nor was it the white of paper. Instead, it seemed to be flowing with a faint luster, more like jade. This person's facial features were very delicate, his skin smooth, and there was not a single wrinkle on his forehead or hands. He did not seem alive. If not for the demon horn on his head, he might have been mistaken for a beauty carved out of white jade by a master craftsman of the Mutuo clan. It turned out that the ancient demon experts of legend were actually this good-looking. Qin Changsheng suddenly recalled his first meeting with the demon lord in Mount Han. The demon lord had also been a very delicate scholar. Xiao Zhang snorted, apparently rather dissatisfied. But it was hard to tell if he was ashamed of his inferiority or disdainful. The answer was not in the wind, but at the bottom of the white paper. This person was Mountain Man Yinji. The mountain was his demon body. This was his true body. If he really did chase, both sides would be heavily injured. Mountain Man Yinji looked at the person next to Xiao Zhang and said, "Even if you are Wang Pa." This person was dressed in a blue gown that had been washed so many times that it had turned white. His shoulders drooped and his brow drooped, making him look like a poor accountant. Of course, it was Wang Pa. Senior's cultivation is unfathomable. My sides for working together barely managed to win, so I naturally would not have any delusions. This was the truth. Even with Xiao Zhang's tyrannical spear style, the harmonious swords of Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong, the sword array, and the Tong Bao, they had still not been able to defeat Mountain Man Yinji. They had only managed to heavily injure him, and then they had encountered Wang Po's blade from the heavens, which he had been preparing for a long time, resulting in their defeat. Now that Xiao Zhang, Chun Changsheng, and Su Yurong no longer had the strength to fight, it was very difficult for Wang Pa to defeat the combined might of Mountain Man Jinghua and Mountain Man Yichun. Of course, the reverse was also true. Mountain Man Yinji said, "So I stopped them from attacking and had them leave." Wang Pa said, "Senior wanted to preserve the continuation of the Mountain Man lineage." Mountain Man Yinji said, "I've already done my best. Presumably, after I die and see Great Teacher, he won't be able to say anything about me." Qin Changsheng was well-versed in the Taoist canon. Su Yurong was extremely well-read, and Wang Po and Xiao Zhang were extremely knowledgeable, but they only knew that the 8 great mountain men had some sort of relationship with Grand Scholar Tungus. Who was the great teacher that Mountain Man Yinji spoke of? Was it Grand Scholar Tungus? If this was the case, then the 8 great mountain men being Tungus' students was truly a secret that no one knew. But why did he call Tungus great teacher? Was it because Tungus had the word great in his title? Or could it be that the 8 great mountain men had another young teacher? Qin Changsheng and the others thought of the other contents of the rumor, and their expressions flickered. In the most secretive of rumors, it was said that the appearance of the 8 great mountain men was also related to the Pope of that generation. Could it be that the Pope was also their teacher? Yes, we have 2 teachers. Mountain Man Yinji confirmed their conjecture. All cultivators knew of the relationship between the Pope and Grand Scholar Tungus. From purification to star condensation, the countless rules and knowledge that the common people now took for granted came from the correspondence between these 2. In terms of influence and martial strength, the Pope and Grand Scholar Tungus might not have been the best, but in terms of their influence on history, they had the right to be ranked in the top 3. In terms of intelligence and knowledge, the 2 were far ahead of anyone else. The wisest geniuses often had the craziest ideas. Grand Scholar Tungus and the Pope had actually succeeded in concealing themselves from the entire world and secretly worked together to carry out a single task. Perhaps it was to verify the possibility of eternal life, the continuity of the soul, the exchange of information between races, or perhaps it was purely out of boredom. They created the 8 great mountain men. Many of the details of this process had already disappeared. The 8 great mountain men themselves did not know, but there was one thing that was certain. They were not demons, nor were they humans, nor were they mixed bloods like Qi Jian. Rather, they were a life form that existed between the two races, perhaps even above them. Every existence needed meaning, or perhaps it could be said that existences would actively seek out meaning and bestow it upon themselves. Grand Scholar Tungus and the Pope passed away one after the other. The 8 great mountain men left the orchard and came to the world. They began to ponder this matter. Given their intelligence, they could not guess at the true thoughts of their 2 teachers, much less touch upon the domains of eternal life and the soul. In the end, they reached a conclusion. The 2 teachers had created themselves to prove that the human race and the demon race could live in peace, should live in peace. They were the symbol of peace. Mountain Man Yinji said, "Our goal is world peace. Before peace is finally achieved, we at least hope that neither the divine race nor the human race will become too powerful, leading to the danger of extermination on the other side. Thus, when one side is at its peak, we will help the other side." Chun Changshang said, "So in those years when you led the army to fight against Emperor Taizong, you suddenly disappeared." Mountain Man Yinji replied, "Yes. Where were you when the demon race was at its peak? And where were you during the siege of Luoyang?" Su Yurong suddenly said, her voice very cold. Mountain Man Yinji replied, "At the time, the human race still had many experts and was not in danger of extermination." Su Yurong asked, "As long as the race was not exterminated, the humans were treated like livestock and treated as food by the demon race. Do you all feel that it doesn't matter?" Mountain Man Yinji fell quiet for a while, then said, "As I said earlier, when we were young, we read many human stories and plays in Shualao City. The latter were brought to the theater by Great Teacher, while the former were sent to us by Little Teacher. In the end, there are still some differences between the two. They had been born in Shualao City and had grown up in Shualao City, so they naturally had a much deeper affection for the demon race. As time passed, their sense of belonging to the human race grew fainter and fainter, even though the human blood flowing through their veins would not grow fainter. So your existences have no meaning. In the eyes of the demon race, you are grass on the wall that swings with the wind. Presumably, both the old demon lord and the current demon lord are extremely wary of you. I even think that the old demon lord has probably killed a few of your members. And to the human race, you are no different from Black Robe, all traitors." Su Yorong's voice was very calm, but her words were extremely lethal. Wang Pe and Xiao Zhang glanced at each other, not knowing what to say. The truth was the most hurtful. It was obvious that Su Yurong was right about the 8 great mountain men's encounter with the demons. Mountain Man Yinji angrily retorted, "We waver, but that doesn't mean we are traitors. Don't compare us to Black Robe." Su Yurong changed the topic and pointed to a place to the north. What was originally in the darkness over there? Mountain Man Yinji froze, then said, "We're already at a time like this. There's no need to bring it up again." Su Yurong's lips perked up as she jeered. Even at a time like this, the demon race is still fighting among themselves. It would truly be illogical for the race not to be exterminated. Mountain Man Yinji had a rather nasty expression. "It's obvious that this is Black Robe's scheme. Why do you need to cover it up for him?" Su Yurong asked, "Is it the demon commander?" Mountain Man Yinji hesitated for a few moments, then nodded. Su Yurong nodded and said, "I don't have anything else to ask." Only now did Wang Pa understand what she was doing, and he felt deep admiration for her. He turned to Mountain Man Yinji and said, "Sir had best have him go a little farther." He was speaking of mountain men Jinghua and Ichuan. The fires of war were merciless and were certain to engulf the entire continent. Even the great western continent might not be able to avoid it. Mountain Man Yinji said, "They will go to the distant abyssal sea." The curtain had truly fallen on the story of the 8 great mountain men. The mission they had given themselves had come to an end. Mountain Man Yinji's words were an admission of defeat. Not tonight's defeat, but the defeat of the entire demon race. Before the war had even begun, he had admitted defeat. To defeat a mountain, one first had to break the mountain's momentum. This was what Xiao Zhang had done. The true strength of a mountain lay in its momentum. The difference between high and low cliffs, the rise and fall of the mountain ridges, all of these were momentum. The momentum of the world lay in the fortune of the various races. In the last 1,000 years, the fortune of the human race had gradually flourished. Emperor Taizong, Emperor Xian, and the Tianhai Divine Empress could all be called wise sovereigns of their generation. Most importantly, they had all died when they should have died, leaving only their good legacies to the great Zhou dynasty. Like the alliance with the demi-human race, the construction of the 17 cities of Snowhold Pass and Blue Pass, the confluence of the north and south. The current emperor was still a wise sovereign. He did not leave the palace, but he was able to govern the world. For 10 years, the weather had been good, the rivers clear. Did he really think that the heavenly Tao was taking pity on him? Compared to the human race, the demon race's luck in the last 1,000 years had been extremely poor. The previous demon lord's abilities were also extremely perfect. He was a true lord of his generation, even worthy of being called grand. If he had died a little earlier. Alas, this demon lord had lived for too long. He was older than Emperor Taizong, and he had even once called Emperor Taizu brother. But Emperor Taizu had died, Emperor Taizong had died, and Emperor Gaozong had died, but he had not died. He was still not willing to die. Only flowing water could not rot. The demon lord had ruled Shuilao City for too long, causing the entire demon race to become lifeless. Even more frightening was that the old demon lord's body was still alive, but his mind was gradually rotting. Perhaps because he had been facing death for too long, he had no mind for politics. He had spent the vast majority of his time and energy cultivating his demon body and soul. He wanted to cure his old injuries, wanted to enter the legendary Grand Freedom Realm, wanted to live forever. Thus, he had taken the risk of entering Mount Han and wanted to eat Chen Changsheng. Thus, he had fallen into Shang Xingzhou's trap, engaged in a world-shaking battle with the White Emperor on the snowy plains, and was heavily injured. Thus, he had revealed a loophole, allowing Black Robe and the demon commander to work together to overthrow him. And then he had been forced into the abyss by his own son. In the end, he had died in the snowy mountains for no other reason than that he had wanted to live too much. It was still the same words as before. Unfortunately, it was truly a pity that he had died too late. If he had died a little earlier like Emperor Taizong, the upper echelons of the demon race would have been more naturally replaced. Even if they would still have weakened, the time for their revival would have come much earlier. In the end, it was all fate. This was the fate of the demon lord, the fate of the demon race. Tonight was the demon race's last chance. The 8 great mountain men had wanted to defy the heavens and change fate, but they had failed. Now the situation of the world had been settled, the demon race gone. Woman, oh woman, old man, oh old man, the starlight shone on mountain man Yinji's ghastly pale face. His lips were also white, and they trembled like piles of snow on the verge of collapsing. Destroy my Mount Yinji and make me unable to smile. After saying this, he closed his eyes and died. To be continued. Chapter 88. With the descent of clear light, Su Yorong used the sacred light technique to treat Chen Changsheng's wounds. Chen Changsheng then used a needle to open Xiao Zhang's meridians and fed him a pill that could ease the blood and open the mind. Xiao Zhang did not thank him. On the contrary, he was very dissatisfied. What about the cinnabar pill? Why not give me a taste? The Li Palace priests, led by Hua and those fanatical believers, had deliberately spread the word that the entire continent now knew of the cinnabar pill's origins and how it was made. This extremely precious and miraculous spirit pill was refined by His Holiness using his own sacred blood. Xiao Zhang also knew, but he didn't care. He thought, what's the big deal about eating a pill? Chen Changsheng explained, the bottle made a few days ago has already been sent to the Mount Song Army headquarters. If you want to eat it, you'll have to wait 10 some more days. The war had not yet begun, and Xiao Zhang was of great importance to the human race, so he did not care. But Su Yurong cared, perhaps because her heart ached for Chen Changsheng, or perhaps because the blood in Chun Chongqing's body was mixed with her blood and could not be separated. To put it another way, half of the cinnabar pill belonged to him, so half belonged to her. What right did he have to decide? She looked at Xiao Zhang and asked, "Are you sure you want to eat it?" When he thought of her conversation with Mountain Man Yanji, Xiao Zhang suddenly felt a little cold. Just treat it as a fart. Wang Po was in a very good mood at this sight, and he began to laugh. Xiao Zhang sneered. "Your fart is also rather loud." Qin Changxing asked, "Why did you come?" This was also what Su Yurong and Xiao Zhang wanted to know. Although the demon commander had not appeared in the end, there was nothing wrong with Black Robe's scheme. Xiao Zhang had sent a message through the bear tribe that the demons had begun their pursuit 10-some days ago. But Qin Changsheng had only received the news 2 days ago. Divine domain experts like Mao Qiyu and the Prince of Xiang had to directly confront the pressure of the demon army, and they had no idea of this matter. Mao Qiyu and the Prince of Xiang had probably sensed Xiao Zhang's breakthrough tonight, but the two sides were too far apart. Not even an expert of the divine domain could make it in time, not unless Biang Hong was revived. The most fundamental reason was still trust. Xiao Zhang did not like this world, so he naturally did not trust it. In his eyes, people like Mao Qiyu and the Prince of Xiang were even more dangerous than demon experts. Just like Su Li, it was still Qin Changsheng. Everything happened so quickly that he didn't even have time to think. Even if he knew that the demons might have set up a trap, he could only barge in. Why would Wang Po appear? He had left White Emperor City, and Su Yurong had left Holy Maiden Peak and come to this grassland because they had a special method of communication and the fastest speed. This could only mean that Wang Po had known about this beforehand. Who told him that? The night before yesterday, the Red Cloud Unicorn went to the Polonia courtyard with a letter. Wang Po said that letter came from Luoyang. There was a monastery of eternal spring in Luoyang. Qin Changsheng looked towards Wang Po. Wang Po nodded. Qin Changsheng was a little surprised. He thought to himself, how could his master know the demon race's plot in advance? There's something wrong with Black Robe, Su Yurong said. Her final conversation with Mountain Man Yinji had been to confirm this point. From the looks of it, there's also a problem with your master. If you want to clarify these questions, you might need to make a trip to Luoyang. The night wind gradually calmed. The smoke and dust had already settled, and a faint trace of white appeared on the horizon. The morning light symbolized the coming of the day. Wang Po asked Xiao Zhang, "Do you want to come with me?" The white paper rustled. That was Xiao Zhang panting, feeling a little annoyed. "I'm no worse than you right now. So why do you care?" In the last few decades, he had truly heard too many such unreasonable words. Wang Po chuckled, unconcerned. As expected, Xiao Zhang was still arrogant and irascible, his temper terrible. Qin Changsheng was very curious as to why someone of his temperament would ask him for help. The reason Xiao Zhang had given was very simple, but it was powerful, even moving. I've cultivated for several decades, and I'm not ashamed to say that I've been extremely diligent, even at the risk of cultivation defect, to finally reach my current level and see the possibility of crossing that threshold. How much of a pity would it be if I died at this time? Even if I have to die, I have to first go over and take a look at the scenery on that side. Moreover, if I can't cross that threshold, dying in battle on the snowy plains could be considered a tragic and moving death, but the human race is on the verge of victory, and I'm on the verge of entering the divine domain. My body is useful, so how can I just casually die? I have to be more careful with my life. If he could cross that threshold, his once intense love and hate, his suspicion of the world, his pride, and his indulgence would have to be temporarily set aside, because he needed to live for the sake of the human race. To put another way, he would no longer be himself, or at least not just himself. Wang Po felt somewhat comforted, Qin Changsheng felt somewhat sorrowful, and Su Yurong was rather quiet, thinking, does the scenery behind that threshold really have such a large effect on cultivators? The morning breeze was rather chilly, but the atmosphere was rather warm, but Xiao Zhang did not like it. He liked to be revered and feared by others. He did not like to be admired or liked by others. He was used to a cold-toned life, so in order to prevent the conversation from becoming a warm one, he somewhat stiffly changed the subject. Your unity sword art is truly extraordinary, Xiaozhang said to Chen Changsheng and Su Yurong. Although he had stiffly changed the subject, his expression was very serious because he was speaking the truth. The unity sword art he spoke of referred to Chen Changsheng and Su Yurong's harmonious swords, but it was not limited to this. It also included their coordination with Mountain Man Yinji. This seamless, unrestrained, and star-like coordination required two people's minds to be completely linked. The entire world knew that Chen Changsheng and Su Yurong were Daoist companions, but everyone knew that linking their minds had always been the most difficult thing in the world. Even mother and son, comrades who had gone through life and death together, husband and wife who had been married for many years, would find it very difficult. So why could they do it? Even someone like Xiao Zhang was praising them. Chen Changsheng was both happy and worried. Firstly, this question was not easy to answer, and secondly, Yurong was in a rather bad mood tonight. He was worried that if he answered inappropriately, she would be even more unhappy. Xiao Zhang's gaze moved back and forth between him and Su Yurong. Is there some problem between the two of you? Is there some problem between the two of you? The starlight fell on the courtyard, turning the green bricks silver and the light yellow sleeves of Chen Changsheng's robes buds yellow. Qi Jian was rather uneasy as she looked at Zhixio, her hands tightly gripping her sleeves. A few years ago, he would have been staring at these silver bricks because he loved silver the most. Otherwise, he would have been staring at her. He loved this dress the most, loved looking at her the most. What did everything start to change? Qi Jian's expression was rather lonely as she gazed at Zhixio's back. Zhixio had no intention of turning around, nor did he directly answer the question. Don't let your thoughts run wild. Sleep early. I'll be back in a little while. The courtyard was on the side of the mountain behind the verdant canyon. In front of it was a grassland that looked like a beautiful carpet in the starlight. A small path led deep into the grassland. It had probably been trampled out by someone's feet, and it looked like a white thread on a carpet. Zhixio had stayed here for many years. Although he had not yet married Qi Jian, all of Mount Li had already tacitly approved of it. It was just that no one had any means of contacting Su Li, so this matter could only be temporarily delayed. Zhixio was still silent, the lines of his face somewhat gentler. His sleeves and trousers were no longer as short as they had been in the past. Every few days, he would go to the front of the mountain to listen to the Mount Li Sword Sect Master's sword music. His tide rush of blood had gotten much better. Although he had not completely recovered, it had already been several years since it had flared up. His cultivation had also advanced extremely quickly. In the early spring, the peach blossom trees outside the courtyard's fence had bloomed overnight, and he had finally reached the peak of star condensation. Coupled with the special abilities brought about by his hybrid bloodline of humans and wolves, his current battle prowess was terrifyingly great. Guan Feibai and Liang Banhu were no longer his match, and Bai Kai could not last more than 3 moves against him. Even when fighting against the elders of the Sword Hall, he would not be at a disadvantage. To travel from Mount Li to this grassland, one needed to pass through the path of the sword over the verdant canyon. During the day, some elders and disciples would come to this grassland to practice their swords. At night, this grassland would be quiet and devoid of people. Only he, Qi Jian, and the girl living in that tree deep within the grassland were present. As he gazed at that distant tree, Zhixio slightly narrowed his eyes, his gaze rather sharp. For such a large tree to exist in a grassland that stretched as far as the eye could see was already a very strange sight. This tree would require 10-some people to encircle it. Its surface was extremely smooth, as if it had no bark. There were very few branches growing horizontally, and the number of leaves did not match the size of the tree at all. Only at the highest point did it appear somewhat lush and bare. From a distance, it really did look like a sword. Zhixio walked up to the tree and raised his head to look up. You've come. You've come. As if they sensed his gaze, 2 voices rang out. These 2 voices seemed to speak at the same time, yet they were clearly separated from each other. It was impossible to tell that these 2 voices had been spoken by a single person. One voice was crisp and clear, brimming with spiritual energy and brimming with pleasant surprise. The other voice was extremely soft and somewhat hoarse, sounding very lazy. With a gust of wind and a flow of blue light, two women landed at Jushio's side. Both women were very beautiful, but their attire and style were completely different. One of the women was dressed in a plain long dress, her entire body wrapped up so tightly that nothing could be seen. She wore no makeup, her face bare, and she was extremely elegant. Her eyes were wide open as she looked at Jushio, her expression very innocent and cute. Her two hands were very carefully holding onto Jushio's sleeve. The other woman was dressed in red. Her black hair draped over her shoulders, still somewhat wet. Her eyebrows were like a painting, and her eyelashes lightly blinked. She possessed a myriad of amorous feelings. Her entire body had already tilted into Jushio's embrace, her soft peaks seemingly carelessly and lightly pressing against Jushio's upper arm. One was moving, one was seductive, one pure, one charming. Any man in the world would probably find it very difficult to resist this sort of allure. Jushio did not react, nor did he reveal the displeasure or even loathing that a virtuous gentleman would. He was not a virtuous gentleman, and he recognized these two women. He knew that while they were beautiful, they were not real people, but spiritual bodies. They were Nang's two wings, called Hua Chui and Ningqiu. Back in the snowy mountains, Nang had been heavily injured and her brain disease flared up, causing her wings to disappear. Even when they appeared, they could not take human form. It was only on a certain night, not too long ago, that they reappeared. It was also from that night that Jushio began to frequently visit the tree. The wings of light silently flapped as Hua Chui and Ningqiu flew up with Jushio. In Jushio's eyes, the smooth surface of the tree was like a road that was constantly moving backward. After a few dozen feet, there were more branches and leaves. The greenery gradually became more luxuriant, and there was a feeling of lush greenery. Someone had built a tree house on the tree, and in front of it was a platform 3 feet wide. Standing there, one could probably see the magnificent grassland and the setting sun. Jushio walked into the treehouse. Nank was squatting on the floor, her left hand hugging her knees and her head resting on them. Her right hand held a branch and was currently drawing something on the ground. Hearing the footsteps, she raised her head and said to Jushio, "You've come." This was a statement devoid of emotion. Just like her voice, it was still as flat as before, devoid of any undulations. The space between her eyes was still rather wide, and her expression was still rather lifeless, but it was much better than it was in the past. The Mountly Sword Sect Master's clear sound of the righteous sword was truly formidable. Other than Jushio's tide rush of blood, it was also extremely beneficial to her. Jushio did not exchange pleasantries with her. He directly asked, "Have you thought it over?" Because it was too direct, it seemed rather wooden, but it could also be understood as unyielding. Nank replied, "You've already asked me 29 nights in a row." Jushio replied, "You still have 1 day." Nank replied, "I still haven't thought it over." Jushio fell quiet for a while, then said, "If you still give me this answer tomorrow, I will kill you." Nank replied, "If you're wary of me, you should tell the people of the Mountly Sword Sect and work together with them to kill me. Why ask me this question every night?" Yes, she had already woken up 29 days ago. It was also on that night that Nank's 2 wings reappeared on the grassland, bringing with them a strange and beautiful green light. Jushio saw that green light and knew of this matter, so he came to the tree to ask her a question. Even tonight, Nank had still not been able to give him the answer he wanted. "Chun Changsheng entrusted you to me, so I have the responsibility to take care of you. I don't want you to die." Jushio added, "And you're her relative. If you die in Mountly, she will probably be very sad." Nank placed a branch in her hand on the floor and said, "But in the end, you will still kill me." Jushio replied, "You can stay here." This was the answer he wanted to hear from Nank. Nank calmly gazed at the dark grassland and said, "The humans are about to go to war. I naturally have to return." Although her hatred for the current demon lord was as deep as the sea, she was still a demon princess. Once you return to Shualao City, you will be an enemy, Zhishio continued. So I will not let you leave, even if I have to kill you. Nank replied, I need to think some more. Her voice was still very flat, unperturbed, devoid of emotion. Zhishio calmly gazed at her, then suddenly said, Okay. After saying this word, he walked out of the tree house. The branch on the floor suddenly and noiselessly turned black and then into ash. On the terrace outside the house, 2 green wings of light slowly floated about, ready to launch a sneak attack at any time. Nang's face was devoid of emotion as she gazed at Zhishio's back. It was like she was looking at a dead man. To be continued. Chapter 89. Nang had no hopes that her 2 maids would be able to cause any trouble for Zhishio. She only needed the 2 maids to attack. The tree branch that had been incinerated to ash contained a deadly poison, and it would also activate a killing array on the platform. Then, she had prepared 29 plans for Zhishio. This was an ambush that had been planned for a long time. With Nang's abilities, this ambush was flawless. Every detail could be described as perfect. As long as Zhishio was not prepared, he would definitely be defeated and then killed. Even though he was already a peak star condensation expert, even though he had been publicly acknowledged as the person most skilled in battle since he was very young. Had Zhishio predicted that Nank would suddenly launch a sneak attack? The front of his leather boots split open, revealing sharp and bright claws. His body suddenly grew larger, and hair like steel needles protruded from his face and hands that were exposed outside his clothes. His aura had also become several times stronger in an extremely short period of time. He did not walk out of the treehouse. Without hesitation, he went berserk, gathered all his energy, and attacked Nank. How had he seen through all these arrangements? Nank was slightly perplexed as she watched the sharp wolf claws tear through the air. In the next moment, she dispelled those emotions. Her eyes became incomparably bright, just like the moonlight in a snowy night. The moonlight reflected off the leaves outside the treehouse, instantly dyeing them green. 2 streams of light pierced through the wall and arrived behind her, forming 2 wings of light that flapped. In the narrow treehouse, Nang transformed into a shadow and teleported 10-odd times, dodging Zhishio's attacks. The treehouse was simply unable to endure. With a series of crackles, it shattered into tens of thousands of pieces that fell like rain. The green leaves on the treetop also rustled down, also very much like rain. In the torrential rain of leaves and shards, 2 figures fell. 2 dull thuds could be heard as they landed heavily on the ground, sending up mud and then falling back down. Zhishio's clothes were riddled with cracks. They were extremely smooth and were dyed a faint green. Some of the cracks were rather deep, with blood gushing out. Red and green mixed together, appearing rather strange and disgusting. The peacock plume was Nank's most terrifying weapon. Even Chun Chongqing's perfect purification and his skin that had been bathed in dragon blood could not completely block it, nor could Zhishio. Because of the berserk transformation, Zhishio's eyes should have been blood red, but now they were an earthen yellow. He had probably been poisoned. Nank's injuries were even more severe. An enormous gash had been ripped open on her left wing of light, and there was a very deep wound on her neck. However, the blood that flowed out was black. How did you know I would make a move tonight? Nank had long since decided to leave. Even if she waited until tomorrow, the result would be the same. Tomorrow, Zhishio might tell this matter to the Mount Li Sword sect. She was not confident that she could break through Mount Li's myriad sword array. Rather than wait until tomorrow, he might as well make the first move today. I didn't know you would do it. Zhishio said, I'm prepared to kill you. It was the same principle. He knew that Nank would not change her mind, so it was better to settle this matter today. Nank had been brought to Mount Li by Chun Chongqing. This was an internal matter of the Orthodox Academy. He did not want the Mount Li Sword sect to get involved. Your poison can't kill me. Nank wiped the blood from her neck and licked her fingers. The most poisonous bird in the world was the surpassing bird. The surpassing bird was the peacock. She was the peacock, Zhishio replied. Although your poison is formidable, it's still very difficult for it to kill me. In the Garden of Zhou, he had been poisoned by Nank, blinded in both eyes, and carried Qi Jian on his back as he ran through the plains of the unsetting sun. After leaving the Garden of Zhou, he was imprisoned in Zhou prison, but the poison was still not cured. It was only when Chen Changsheng and Tang 36 brought him back to the Orthodox Academy that it took a very long time for him to be cured. Nang's poison had remained in his body for a very long time, allowing him to develop a resistance to it. This was naturally related to the special structure of his body. Nang said, "I didn't think that you would ambush me." Zheshio replied, "I'm a hunter." When he was very young, he had been expelled from the wolf tribe and had to struggle for survival in the snowy plains, relying on hunting monsters and demons to survive. His goal in fighting was survival, and he was willing to use any means necessary. When he needed to kill his enemies, he would never be merciful. Nang thought for a while, then said, "It's been too long. I've somewhat forgotten." Zheshio replied, "Yes, we've lived here for too long." This was not the cruel and bloody, snowy plains of the demon realm, where the moment one opened one's eyes, life and death, survival and survival. This was the warm and comfortable plains of the south. The sword glows of Mount Li were more for exploration, not slaughter. After living here for so many years, they had almost forgotten many things. Zheshio added, "I'm very sorry. You are not willing to continue living here with us, and this is truly very regrettable. I have to kill you, and this is also very regrettable." The peacock plume, glowing with a dark green light, was about to clash with the sharp wolf claws once more. A sword glow came from the west and blocked their path. The sword intent was not awe-inspiring, but it was as calm as water, soft but difficult to break, and unending. What followed was a lazy voice. "This being the case, what need is there for so many regrets?" Zheshio and Nank were both heavily injured, but there were not many people that could block both of them at the same time. The Mount Li Sword sect had many experts, but they could only find 8 or 9 people, and the only one with such a lazy voice was Qiushan Jungo Hanshi had come, Liang Banhu, Guan Feibai Bai Kai, and Qi Jian had also come. She looked sadly at Nank and said, "Little aunt, can't you just stay? I was born there, grew up there. I walked there, I flew there, and I was only 2 streets away from the moon." Nank said, "Now, that place is about to be destroyed by you humans, so I have to do something for it." The wind rustled the leaves on the ground, but it was particularly quiet. After some time, Qiushan Jun's voice rang out. "Take care, I won't send you off." Nank was not surprised, nor did she thank him. She said to Qiushan Jun, "Go Hanshi and the others. All of you will go there, so we will meet again." That place was naturally Xiulao City. In the last few years, they had been companions that roasted meat, sang, danced, and sparred with the sword around the campfire, but when they met again, they would be mortal enemies. This was something worth sighing over, but why did it also feel so uninteresting? Seeing that stream of light disappear into the darkness, Qiushan Jun sighed. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Zheshio's expression and could not help but frown. In his opinion, this brother-in-law of his was good in every other aspect, but his temperament was a little too cold. Qin Changsheng's letter says that if Nank insists on leaving, don't stop her. Go Hanshi explained. He didn't say how he knew Nank had woken up. In his view, Nank was the trouble that Chen Changsheng had brought to Mount Li. Since Chen Changsheng had made the arrangements, Zheshio had no reason to object. Do you want to guess how many black-armored cavalrymen Nank will poison to death? Zheshio did not think this way, and was even very dissatisfied with Chen Changsheng. You and Chen Changsheng want to show courage, breadth of mind, friendship in my eyes, it's all stupid. Guan Feibai sneered, "What do you know? You know nothing about the war." Zheshio expressionlessly said, then turned and left. Qi Jian chased after him. To be continued.